Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the Astrology of June 2023. I hope that you're doing well out there. Um, Happy Friday, happy new moon in the third decan of Taurus. If you want to get some deep dive information on that, I just did a live stream on that last week, so check that out on the channel. But I want to welcome all of you here today on a nice Friday. And yes, before I get some comments in the chat, I am beardless today. This was a parting gift, I think, from Mars and Venus. Mars in Cancer. I tried to trim my beard yesterday and I shaved a hole in it. And I had to just shave off the whole entire thing. So maybe, Venus is applying to my sun right now in the 12th house. So maybe a mistake is helping out. Who knows? So we'll just roll with it. But I hope that you're all doing well out there. Forgive me for my Leo rising vanity. I want to welcome a few friends here today. We're going to go on a journey. We're probably going to be here a few hours. There's a lot of astrology to cover in June. We're going to go over lunations, ingresses, solar phases, out of bounds planets. We have a void of course moon, a Hellenistic void of course moon this month. I'm going to give you a preview of some of my decans webinars and things of that nature. So buckle in. Before I welcome our friends here, I want to let you know that the Decans of Taurus is on sale until the 21st of May. So you have a couple more days to get 20% off of that. And I'll show you a few of those slides today. And the Decans of Gemini will be on sale until the 21st of June. And I put that on sale a little bit early, so you can pick that up today as well. Okay. As always, I'm available for readings. My books are open for end of May, early June. If you're having some challenges and you want to talk it out, I'd be happy to work with you in that regard as well. Okay, friends. So Jody is here from sunny South Florida. Nice to see you, Jody. Sounds like it's hot down where you are. Jeannie is joining us from Seoul, South Korea, 2 a.m. Wow, Jeannie, that's amazing that you are joining us here from South Korea. That's awesome. Welcome. And I hope that you have a good time with us and get a nap later on in the day. Rachel Fletcher is here from Roanoke, Virginia. Hello, Rachel. Happy spring to you, friend. Let's see who else is here. Juliet Carrington is here from Maine. Hello, Juliet. Beth is joining us here. Hello, Beth. I got your message today and I appreciate your advice, and I'll be getting in touch with you soon. Monique, what's up, Monique from Los Angeles, California? If you aren't following Monique is a fellow Nightlight astrology alum, and she has some really funny Instagram story stuff. So follow Monique on Instagram for if you want a good laugh every once in a while. Oh, who else is here? Dawn Fisher joining us from Mobile, Alabama. Hello, Dawn. Nice to see you. Happy new moon. Channel 12 is here today as well. All right. Well, I don't know if this is a news channel, but that's cool. Nice to see you, Channel 12. It's a new name. Carolyn Perkins. Hello, Carolyn. Hope you got my donation check by snail mail. Yes, I did, Carolyn, and thank you so much. And I gave you a sort of veiled shout out last week, but I appreciate the wonderful card and letter and donation that you sent me in the mail, and I appreciate you, and thank you so much for your generosity. Okay, and you're joining us from Carmel Valley, California. Hope it's nice out there for you. Robin Nadira is here from Healdsburg, California. We've got all of our California peeps in here today, so that's fun. So thank you so much for joining us here today. I hope that we'll be able to go on a journey and have a good time, do some astrology, share some stories, maybe have some catharsis along the way. Who knows? But we're a fun group here, I think, and we try to keep it somewhat lighthearted, but also we try not to shy away from some of the challenging parts of life as well. So as I'm recording this, we have this new moon that we're experiencing at 28 degrees of Taurus, and Venus is in Cancer hosting this new moon. So Again, this new moon was all about kind of, or is potentially going to be about trying to remedy some things that may have not been going completely correctly in our lives, right? Evaluating our efforts so far. And as we move into June, we're probably going to be continuing on with that cycle. We're going to be working through Gemini and Cancer season in particular, so we'll take a look at some of that as well. Venus right now is out of bounds, but it will be back in bounds by the beginning of June. So that's good. And by the end of the month, we'll have Mercury moving out of bounds. So a little bit of a different, planet going outside of the socially expected norms. But it happens. It's just part of the celestial symphony, if you will. So just a couple big picture thoughts before I dive into all of this here today. And of course, if you want to support the channel and the work that I'm doing, easiest thing you can do is like this video. Do me a favor and do that if you're here today. You can subscribe to the channel, which helps you know when I'm going to be going live. Subscribe to my newsletter where you can get discounts and where I've been doing this kind of song of the week type of experience lately and talking more about the decans in my newsletter recently. So that's a great way to kind of learn some more things as well. And if you want to support the work I'm doing here, you can either sign up for a reading, purchase my Decans webinars, or you can do a little super chat or super sticker, which is the $ in the chat here today. That helps me keep the lights on. And if you're consuming this video or audio after the fact, you can do a super thanks. And I want to shout out to my friend in Israel, Noga, who did a super thanks last week. I appreciate you, friend. Yeah, you can buy me coffee at buymecoffee.com. Sorry, my brain's getting rolling here today. We'll get into the flow of it. Dimpy is here from the Netherlands. Hello, Dimpy. Dimpy's been sending me all sorts of good exercise stretching videos lately that I've been appreciating to keep my back and my hips loose. So thank you, Dimpy, for that. Speaking of that, I need to get my little foot thing here. Sorry. I'm just getting it all together today. Normally when I'm sitting in this chair, I kind of have almost like a squat position, which helps me to kind of feel a little bit more comfortable. I don't like sitting with just my feet on the floor for so long. I kind of am in like a squat movement position. Yeah, Rachel says, love the song of the week feature. Yeah, this week we had a song that reflected Jupiter in Taurus, which is one of the really big features of 2023 is Jupiter moving through Taurus and the T-square that we're experiencing coming up this weekend at the end of May here. And again, I broke that down for you last week, but we can talk a little bit about it today, but we got to get through June. And we had Got My Mind Set on You by James Ray originally, and then covered by George Harrison in the 80s. Just a great tune, just a fun bop from my childhood. The George Harrison version was one that I was more familiar with, but it just talks about, it's going to take time. It's going to take patience and time. It's going to take money. And I think that as long as we've got our mindset on the goal and we plan in advance, it can help us to get through and some of the challenging times and expand our abundance in ways that will support our foundation. So check that out. Subscribe to the newsletter to get the song of the week. And I include the videos and everything and the tarot associations. So it's a fun new feature. Yeah, Dimpy's pointing out that we're trying to get in sync here with the Pleiades in this new moon also. Yeah, that wasn't something I mentioned as much on the live stream last week, but that's a good point. And I saw my friend Gemini Brett talking about that a little bit this week as well. And just to kind of bring some insight into that, the interesting thing about the new moon Pleiades, and I'll make this short because we have, like I said, we got ground to cover. We'll be here for 3.5, 4 hours if I keep going on this tact. I talked last week about the new moon and the Litai as the old women that followed behind Eight, who was a daimon or spirit associated with rashness or ruin. And I thought one interesting thing, fixed star-wise, is that there are some challenging fixed stars in the last decan of Taurus. Capulus, the fixed star at 24 degrees of Taurus, which is the sword of Perseus, which talks about the rashness of a blade that cuts through things, of this yang masculine warrior energy. And then a couple degrees after that, we have that fixed star Algol, which is associated with like the powerful feminine energy. So we have really powerful yang energy, powerful yin energy, and sometimes that can be procreative, but also destructive. And then you have the Pleiades around, it's a big stretch of a cluster of fixed stars from roughly 28 Taurus, stretching all the way to the first degrees of Gemini. And though that you could also think of those as those Liti women that were following behind, literally following behind these difficult fixed stars, offering up the catharsis of grief, repentant prayer. There's stories with those Pleiades that are associated with these nymphs or nymphi that were being chased by Orion the hunter and trying to escape from a tormentor on some level. And we can dive into that in depth, but check out my Decans of Gemini if you want to get more information on the Pleiades. I go over those stories. I also go over that in quite a bit of depth in I believe, the Decans of Scorpio as well, because Orion has some significations with the Scorpion as far as like being able to he's chased by the Scorpion. He bragged about his hunting prowess, that he could kill everything on the earth, basically. And Artemis, or the moon, was like, you're not going to do that to my creations, and sent that big Scorpion after him. And they're literally kind of opposing in the sky. So when Orion is setting, Scorpion is rising. So, and that also has some association with the nymphi or the Pleiades as well, because the nymphi is one of the daimonic or spirits of the first decan of Scorpio. So just a little diversion there into fixed star lore. But I know a lot of people have been asking me more about fixed stars lately, so I want to make sure I'm kind of, playing to the crowd a little bit. So, all right. Yeah, Don says, I love Brett's video about Bear. Awesome stuff. Yeah, he's a really intelligent guy. He has a lot of really interesting sky stories and theories, and he's very good at the mathematical parts of astrology. Way more advanced than I am in that regard, as far as like the geometric shapes and things of that nature. But we all have our strengths and the things that we play to. But I'm fully on board with supporting other astrologers and getting a different voice, because sometimes you'll have somebody that will say things in a certain way that will resonate and that will land differently, even if they're talking about the same exact transit, the same exact teaching, something of that nature. So I feel like on some level there's enough to go around, right? Susanna is joining us from Finland. Hello, Susanna. Nice to see you, friend. Stephen the Jupiterian says, happy Venus Day and new moon. Nice to see you, Stephen, from San Francisco. Lisa is here. Says, love the fixed star stuff. Yeah, that is a really interesting extra like layer to put on top of astrology, because the stories, the myths that are associated with those fixed stars are really powerful and very literal. Oftentimes you can just really see this play out within your life. So we can talk about a little bit more of that today as well. I've got plenty of notes. Again, like, I've got my 5 pages of notes here, and we'll see how far we get. So let's start talking about June. So a couple just big picture thoughts. We have lunations, which are phases of the moon. We have a full moon on the 3rd of June at 13 degrees of Sagittarius. We have a last quarter moon on the 10th of June at 19 degrees of Pisces. We have a new moon in the 3rd decan of Gemini at 26 Gemini on the 18th, and then a first quarter moon of that phase at 4 degrees of Libra on the 26th of June. And I'll go over each of these in depth as we go through each week. Ingresses, which is a fancy word for a planet moving into a new sign. And it's important to track ingresses, especially as a Hellenistic astrologer. When a planet moves signs, it's moving into a new house if you use whole sign houses. So you can really feel an energetic shift. When a planet moves into a different house, it just brings a different focal point. It brings a different set of dignities, a different set of challenges and opportunities. So the ingresses for this month, we have Venus moving into Leo on the 5th of June. Pluto will be retrograding back into Capricorn on the 11th. June 11th is a really big day. There's just a lot of stuff happening, a lot of changes happening around June 11th. Mercury will also be moving into Gemini on that day, gaining some dignity. And then we have the summer solstice with the ingress of the sun into Cancer. So that's the 21st of June, the sun moving into Cancer, another big shift. The sun is kind of switching direction, and instead of ascending in the sky in its declination or in its path from the ecliptic, it'll start descending. It gets to the very height of its, I don't know if you'd call it its power, but the height of its declination. Declination, again, is a fancy word for the distance that the sun is from the ecliptic, above or below the ecliptic. And at the summer solstice, it is as far above the ecliptic as it's going to rise at noon. And then at the winter solstice, it's as far below as it's going to rise. So we have a return of the light at the winter solstice, and we have the start of the descent at the summer solstice. And then on the June 26th, Mercury will be moving into Cancer. So, and it'll be out of bounds around that time. So a lot of emotional conversations that we have to be wary of around that period of time, in addition to a challenging aspect at the end of June that I will discuss as well. Solar phases. Solar phases is a relationship of a planet to the sun, like going under the beams, cazimi, retrograde station, or direct station. These are really important in Hellenistic astrology because they are omens that speak, moments of phasis. As if you are familiar with Robert Schmidt's work, he really focuses a lot on phasis moments of planets. So on the 17th, we'll have Mercury moving under the beams of the sun at 11 degrees of Gemini, in addition to Saturn stationing retrograde at 7 degrees of Pisces. So Mercury moves under the beams, Saturn stations retrograde, same day. Saturn will be retrograde until the 4th of November, where it stations direct at 0 degrees Pisces. So it's not going to dip back into Aquarius at all. So we're still just hanging out with Saturn and Pisces, like reevaluating our dreams and seeing which ones are going to fly and which ones need to be composted. And on the 30th, Neptune will station retrograde at 27 Pisces, and then station direct on the 6th of December. Now, this isn't a super huge deal in my estimation. A lot of the outer planets spend roughly half of each year retrograde. Just means that maybe some of the things that we're evaluating with outer planet transits may be up for review, and we may have to examine some of our dreams, in addition to our idealism and what we are willing to sacrifice for, especially with the third decan of Pisces with Neptune there. Out of bounds planets, which again I've described as a planet that is outside the normal declination path of the sun that we talked about with the solstices. Venus is going to be moving back in bounds on June the 1st. So probably some good news for relationships if you've been having challenges in your relationships, or you've been feeling like your desires have been way outside the norm, or whether you've been just kind of maybe attracted to things that are getting you into trouble on some level too. And this doesn't have to be a relationship. This could be just your desires. Venus will be back in bounds, kind of playing by the rules once again in the beginning of June. The moon will be out of bounds from June 3rd to June 7th, and then also from June 16th to June 21st. And then at the end of the month, at June 24th, Mercury moves out of bounds at 24 degrees of Gemini, all the way until July the 6th. So those are some things to keep in mind as we move forward. I will point those out again, but this is kind of your 10-minute summary. One last thing to keep an eye out for this month: the moon is going to be void of course by Hellenistic definition, where it doesn't make any aspects for 30 degrees over sign boundaries. Okay, like the modern definition says when the moon changes signs, that's the end of the void of course. And void of course is basically, the ancient astrologers would say, it's a wanderer. It's like it doesn't have any. Saying it doesn't have any purpose would be extreme, but they would say that nothing would come of the matter. So the void of course moon is important to pay attention to maybe really not start super important things around that period of time. And I think that we've gotten really extreme with the modern interpretation of that, because the modern void of course moon happens like every 3 days or something like that. It's just too much, and you just have to live your life. But I do really pay attention to these Hellenistic ones, because usually these happen once every few months potentially, and it's a good time to just relax, rest, not push things too hard. And that'll be happening from June 18th, right around the new moon this month, to June 21st, from 7 degrees of Cancer, went after the trine to Saturn, all the way until 7 degrees of Leo when it makes a square to Jupiter. So consider what might be going on around that period of time. Take it easy during that period of time. It's going to be a balsamic to new moon phase as well. So, it's good to plan. All right, I'm going to look at the chat here. Don says, oh, yeah, I already got that one. Okay, I'm just going down here. Remco, hello, Remco. Nice to see you joining from the Netherlands once again. Remco, I gotta hand to you. You were Johnny on the spot last week with your sharing of links and things like that. So appreciate that, friend. I hope that is Don here today? What did I have Remco share last week? That was funny. I can't even remember. Remco remind me, because it was the bidet skit from SNL. So Don, I hope you watched the bidet skit from SNL, because the bidet at your house exploded, and got a laugh out of that. Cheers to you. Okay. And Remco, I'll have to say, there's another one that I was wanting to share this week. I'll pull it up because it's easy to find. And this was let me see if I can grab the link to this. This is something I found from, I don't remember exactly where I found this, but there was just something where I was looking at bees or thinking about bees. Someone was talking about the resonance of a beehive, and how the sound of a beehive, I'll put that in the chat there. Maybe we can pin that. The sound of a beehive can help to relieve stress. It can help heal instances of PTSD, potentially, that they've shown in certain studies, where a beehive is attuned and resonates to the key of C. But there's just something very relaxing about it. And as we've been going through some stressful times in mid-May here, I've been sharing this with people in my family, friends, and I'm like, just go check out the bees. Go spend some time in the hive. Get into the hive mind. And I've been doing it myself, and it really is very relaxing. It is very peaceful. It is. I think that there's a lot of answers in nature. There's a lot of healing to be found in the natural world. And I've been finding this as I've been working with my really amazing guided group study group, where we've been reading Sophie Strand's The Flowering Wand. And we're just finished a chapter on Merlin, who was of course, the wizard that helped King Arthur become a great leader, potentially. But her chapter talks a lot about sometimes the answers we seek aren't necessarily found in by human means. Sometimes they're found by going out and listening to a tree, listening to an animal, communing with nature. So that really resonated with me, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that with all of you, because it has been a very powerful reminder as we go through what might be some stressful times in June. There are a few aspects that really piqued my interest, that were like, oh boy, that could be a little bit challenging. So go out, get some sun, listen to the bees, commune with the birds and the squirrels. I have a squirrel. Sorry, this is funny to me. I have a squirrel that I have started tracing back my relationship with this particular squirrel in my yard. And I think it's going on 3 or 4 years now. I had a video on my Instagram a few years ago where a baby squirrel came up to me and hanging out at my feet and was very friendly. And it looks an awful lot like this squirrel that's been coming up to me and receiving almonds and walnuts and things like that. It's quite possible it's the same squirrel, but um, I've been calling him Stinky Big Balls. I'm sorry to be crass about it, but he's a male squirrel and he's very well endowed. The well endowed squirrel. Like, he's going through some challenges with mange right now, so I'm hoping that I can find a way to help him because he's very friendly and I really enjoy just my time outside, hanging out with him in the yard. We'll just call him Stinky for short. Thanks. But I digress. So find the answers in nature, spend some time outside, water your garden, appreciate the little rainbows that you see when in the hose spray. That's been something I've been enjoying, and is just when I'm watering my garden and my pollinator habitat that I've started that's starting to grow. I'll try to post some pictures of that on my Instagram. But things are starting to grow, and I'm seeing these beautiful rainbows when I water the garden. It's just very, there's some Zen qualities to it. And just to give you a little update on the last thing I talked about last week, if you were following along, I did end up making some amends with that. One of the neighbors that I was having a challenge with, and I just kind of approached them and apologized and said, hey, can we just move forward from this without this tension? And they were amenable to that. And then we were able to kind of just release the tension between us. And I think that sometimes you just have to swallow pride and try to figure it out. And because I knew that if I'd continued to stoke a conflict in that situation, there would be no peace for anyone. They would be upset. I would continue to be uncomfortable and upset. And sometimes by just trying to find a reasonable solution, it just, you're facilitating peace rather than adding fuel to the fire. So I just want to give you a little update on that if you've been following along. Okay, looking through the chat, and we'll start getting to the decans here. Yeah, Remco says, love those bees, though in real life I would run away from the hive. Yeah, I mean, not everybody has to have a hive in their backyard, right? And if you come across a swarm of bees, you do have to be careful and be respectful of their space and things like that. But we have these amazing technologies that can help us kind of, be close without being in danger. But if you are in a space where you can interact with bees in a safe way, that's good too. I'm hoping just to attract more beneficial insects to my yard, and I think that they'll leave you alone if you're respectful to them. But again, some people have allergies and things like that, so you just have to be careful. Cobabs is here, says, I learned recently that my grandfather, who passed away before I was born, kept bees. My goal is to begin raising them. Happy new moon, Taurus. That's great, Cobabs. That'd be a great way to carry on the family lineage, right? I've been doing that with, trying to pay tribute to my mom recently, who had an amazing garden, and she passed away last year. And it's been really, I think, healing, trying to go out and create beauty and just return something to the nature that has given me so much, right? I think that's part of the reason to do like a pollinator habitat, is just to give back and give a small oasis in these, like, I guess you call them food deserts for these pollinators and birds and whatnot, by the advance of human, living situations. So it's a service that you can provide. And I just think that that's a really great thing. And I hope that you're able to manifest that, friend. Beth says, I always look forward to the animal card at the end of each episode. Sounds like an amazing book. Yeah. Again, nature is a great teacher, and really highly recommend that book, Beth, if you haven't picked it up yet. It's rooted in mythology, but rooted in a really amazing ecofeminist take, an ability to try to shift our ways of thinking that are inclusive and are collaborative. And I think that that's really something we really need in our modern civilization. Dimfy also says, in yoga as well, the bee breath is called Brahmari breath. Oh, nice. Like, maybe there's a humming involved with that. I always feel good when I hum a little bit. I do. In the mornings, I do some prayers to the planets, but also to a few other deities. And I do some chanting, especially with Ganesh and Lakshmi. I really like those two deities in particular. And it does, like, there's a vibration that really helps me to feel aligned. That is probably similar to what you're talking about. Yeah, so that's a good tip. Lisa says, I have a squirrel named Oliver, large nuts. Yeah, I mean they're just out there. I mean it's nothing to be ashamed of, I guess, with these squirrel guys, but uh, it is kind of funny and sometimes shocking to our modern I don't know, um, what is the sensibilities that we have maybe in America as far as our puritanical sensibilities, right? Maybe less so for our European friends. Um, okay, let's see. I'm just looking at these chats. Steven, it says, when I was in high school, everybody shared their squirrel stories. I love it. I used to take pictures of one squirrel and he would come back to the sliding glass door and knock on it. I would feed him and name him Patches. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, squirrels sometimes have these mites that cause them to lose their hair and things like that, and it can be a little sad if you have a squirrel like that. But usually, it tends to resolve itself, so it's probably not too much to be worried about. Prudence says, I learned that there's these species of bees that burrow in the ground recently. Yeah, ground bees. That's cool, right? There's so many wonderful things to learn about nature. I'm still surprised when I learn about a bug or an animal that I've never heard of before, which you're like, oh, I probably know all the animals by now, but nope. There's just all sorts of new stuff that you learn about. It's really, really awesome. Hey, you're a Dicey Vega is here. Wow, don't look back. You're here now. Like, sorry, that was a little mythological humor. Like, oh boy, corny dad jokes. Come for the astrology, stay for the dad jokes. Okay, friends, let's dive into it. What I would like to do is start by showing you a preview of the Decans of Gemini. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to dive into Gemini 2. So I hope that you can see this here. This is my Decans of Gemini webinar that I did June 11th, 2022, and is for sale on my website. It's 20% off now until the end of Gemini season. Always put them out a little bit early now, potentially just to coincide with the live stream, so that when we talk about it here, you're not like, oh, I gotta wait for it. You can just go and pick it up if you're resonating with what I'm doing. But you could see that we talk about tarot, mythology, the decans themselves, Gemini themes around the myths, contradictions, duality, facing the shadow, liminal spaces is something that we're dealing with as well. Moral contradictions, exploration of options. You know, we've got this pre-solstice energy where we're increasing light, flowering of late spring, procreative air, abstraction and ideals. This is something that's really interesting to me. And again, I'll talk about this more in depth in the 3-hour webinar that I did in this, but I find Gemini season to be one of perfectionism. And I didn't really associate perfectionism with air signs until I took the Nightlight Astrology course and really thought about the idealism of ideal platonic forms versus dealing with realities. And I think that the air signs, and I'm guilty of this too with Venus and Gemini, of having some idealism around certain things in our life, because oftentimes we're basing our expectations on an abstract ideal rather than something real. And that can lead us into some challenging thought processes, disappointments, and we have to be very aware of that. And that also includes, you know, Libra placements and Aquarius placements. You know, Libra placements have a lot of idealism around relationships, and beauty and balance. And Aquarius placements have a lot of idealism around the organization of society and humanity itself. So, you know, this is something to really meditate on. So we're talking about Mercury here. And you can see I'm going through this. This is just the different stories. But what I'm trying to do is get us to Gemini 2. Here's the kind of different Gemini flashcards that we have. We talked about Gemini 1 in the astrology of May, so you can get some more insight into that. The basic gist of that is feeling a paralysis due to splitting of attention in many different directions. Tethys is the daimon or spirit of that decan that is related to the rivers that split off from Oceanus, the kind of the ocean that surrounded the earth in their philosophical worldview. You know, and here's the Pleiades that we were talking about here around 0 degrees of Gemini that are associated with this new moon that we're experiencing today. Um, yeah, it's a nebula as well. And I mean, anytime we have something near a nebula, we have to think about blindness as a theme, right? And trust our inner vision and our intuition. So it's something to consider with this new moon. All right, so we get here to Gemini 2, and we'll dive into this a little bit more here. So Gemini 2 is a Mars-ruled decan in a Mercury-ruled sign. So we've gone from a Jupiter-ruled decan in the first decan of Gemini to a Mars-ruled decan. So we have an expansion of options in the first decan that is a little bit uncomfortable because Jupiter is a planet that enjoys bringing things together in harmony, in creating order and peace. And Mercury is a planet that splits our attention, that casts things into doubt, casts things into question. So that first decan is an explosion of questions and doubts and options. So we're going to start feeling that this weekend coming up as events that are taking place at this new moon are probably going to cause us to start exploring our options and figuring out how to move forward. And that can feel a little bit overwhelming. It's not necessarily a time for action. Sometimes we just have to sit with the ambiguity. And when we get to Gemini 2, sometimes we've explored options and we have so many choices that we can just start to feel overwhelmed. There's a lot of anxiety associated with this decan. And I'm going over this because the sun is going to be in Gemini 2 from June 1st to June 10th. So this is the canvas that all of the other astrology is painted on, in my opinion. The sun shines a big spotlight on this that we share collectively. Doesn't matter where you are. The sun is going to be in Gemini 2, right? So if you consider that this is something that we're going to be going through together, we can find commonality and common themes. So you see a figure in the Nine of Swords here who is having a nightmare. There is some secret significations around a potentially a battle or a duel in the bed here that you notice. I was learning about this from the Secrets of the Rider-Waite Tarot, which is a really great book that I purchased recently. And this is related to Romeo and Juliet and this kind of battle that was going on with these star-crossed lovers and the inability to reconcile the fact that their families were at war, but that they loved each other, right? And that they wanted to be together. And eventually there was tragedy involved with that. So there could be something in our lives in the beginning of June where we just, we feel a little bit uncomfortable with our options. We have things that are pulling us in multiple directions, and there isn't an easy answer. And we're going to have to sit with that a little bit. So themes that I've written down here: anxiety, irreconcilable thoughts, nightmares, insomnia, Yesod in Yetzirah, which is the Kabbalistic sephira on the Kabbalistic tree of life. And Yesod is a moon-ruled sephira. It's the birth canal. It's the one before manifestation. So there may be something where we're having all these thoughts before we're manifesting them into reality. And this also coincides with the 12th house and the Thema Mundi. The Thema Mundi has really opened my understanding of Gemini in a new way that is very different than what I learned in pop astrology. A lot of times people just really kind of take a dump on Gemini in modern astrology, calling it fickle and like a child and all of these things. And some of those things can be true at various times. But in the Thema Mundi way of thinking about the zodiac, these are the last decans before rebirth. This is almost like the end of the cycle rather than the beginning. The youthful qualities of Gemini, I think a lot of that comes from the myths of Hermes and his precociousness as a child and his ability to, steal cattle and play the lyre and things like that, and the literal lute instrument. But if we start considering Gemini as part of the 12th house in the Thema Mundi, we start to get a whole another layer. And I often talk about the myth of with Gemini. And the myth of just to give you the cliff notes on that, is about a Roman soldier that dies but retains his consciousness into the next life, into the liminal space between life and death. and he's aware of the next cycle and the necessity to choose lots. So in the afterlife, according to that myth of you choose lots for the next life, and you from a handful of them, right? Not just any life, just from a handful that you're given, and you have the awareness of all the positives and negatives of that life, and it's really a moral choice. I think that this is why we have morality connected with the Lovers and with the Gemini card in the major arcana, like an ethical moral quandary that is sort of related to this 12th house liminal space. Imagine that you're trying to choose the life that you're going to incarnate into a body, right, before you're born. Because the 12th house is the house that was on the ascendant before the ascendant. It is the pregnant space before birth, before unity of body and mind. And imagine that you understand all the pros and cons of a life and you have to choose. Like, you're going to want to explore all the details around that. You may feel a little bit anxious about, like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go through all this suffering again, or I'm going to go through all these amazing joys. And that's heavy. And I think that this is something that we don't necessarily understand about our Gemini brethren and friends and people that are going through stuff, is that oftentimes they are aware of the choices that are in front of them, and they're indecisive and fickle because they're really struggling with choice. And I think that Gemini is a temporary space. It is a mutable sign. It is changing from spring to summer in the northern hemisphere. It's not somewhere to get stuck in. Like, just like we don't want to get stuck in the liminal space of the afterlife, we need to either go on to something else or infuse into a new body. We don't want to get stuck in a purgatory. There's a purgatory energy to Gemini. But we do need to explore and see what our options are so that we can finally infuse our passion, our energy into our highest priority. This is the next step to the evolution of Gemini energy, is saying, how do we choose what we're going to nurture, into maturity, the transition from Gemini to Cancer, and how are we going to protect it? Okay, so this is a way to get some clarity around that. So be careful in Gemini too, that you don't let the ambiguity of the choices in front of you become destructive, because there's Mars there. We feel split in a lot of different directions. Austin Coppock's book 36 Faces calls this the hermaphrodite, like being able to see both options and maybe feeling split in a lot of different directions. There's a daimon named Cybele, and there's a story of Cybele where Cybele was a very powerful god or deity and had both sexes, but other gods were intimidated by their power, and so they cleaved them in two, and the male half fell to the earth, and there was an almond tree that sprouted, and Cybele was spent much of their life trying to find their other half, and eventually did through another, I don't know if it was a titan named Attis, and then there was a tragic story around that as well. And you can learn more in the Decans of Gemini webinar. But the search for the other half, the search for the lost self, the attempt to unify, right? Even though we feel split in a lot of different directions. One of the things that is talked about a lot in Gemini too also is that when we feel split in a lot of different directions, when we feel uncertain, when we feel insecure, when we feel this anxiety, it is very easy to project that feeling onto an other. We're trying to reconcile light and shadow. And when we project both light and shadow outside of ourselves, it creates this disconnect. It creates this schizophrenic break on some level, right? And we have to be really careful in Gemini season of projecting both our hopes and dreams onto something else or someone else, and our fears onto someone else. So this is why they talk about destructive thinking, mental torture, merciless speech, trash talking. Like it is a Mercury ruled decan, so there's I'm not Decan, sorry, sign. So there is communication involved. But when we have Mars, Mars's house, Mars's room in the Mercury house, there's a, a sharpness to it. And we have to be very careful about projecting our pain onto others as cruelty. And I've experienced this as a Gemini 2 Venus in the past. Sometimes when I was younger, I attempted to create harmony, Venus, through chop busting, which is a Midwestern term of the United States for gentle ribbing, like negging someone, I guess, right? Like kind of making fun of them, but in like a playful way. And I had to really tone that down, especially with my Sagittarian partner who has some Venus in Sagittarius, and her sense of humor, and like she's from California, and they just don't really have that as part of their culture out there either. So I've had to really change that way of interacting, especially with my partner. And it's been healthy, I think so. So really considering how you're communicating, and if your communication is destructive or productive is important. So again, the last theme was inner turmoil projected onto the other. And oftentimes I know that I can be at my worst when I'm not feeling unified, when I'm feeling really just torn in a lot of different directions. I was talking about this with my partner today, is she and I are an amazing team, very powerful when we are unified towards a common goal. But we're floating around in the liminal spaces of both having 12th house suns when we get confused, and we fall prey to self-doubt sometimes, and then nothing gets done. So having a goal, not owning your shadow and reintegrating the shadow is a great thing to do during this period of time. So a couple questions you can ask yourself. Are your thoughts becoming a prison? In the Picatrix, they talk about a lead helmet, okay? And like this lead helmet, protected by a coat of leaden mail, and on his head is an iron helmet, which above it is a silk crown. So there is themes of our thoughts, our mind being this prison, right? Are you caught in the suffering between regret and fear? Is your inner turmoil causing you to lash out? That's a really important one, okay? Can you explore within for the roots of your pain? How can you break out of repetitive thought patterns? And how can you reignite your severed halves of self? Okay. So this is the first 10 days of the month or so that we're going to be looking at. Okay. And we're sort of going on our own little Decan walk as we go through these monthlies. That might turn into something in the future. I have a lot of people that are asking me about that, and tarot in particular, teaching tarot and Decan walks and stuff like that. And I'd be open to that. I would just say be patient with me on new classes and things like that. I've just got a lot going on with my house and stuff like that lately, and client work, and just trying to juggle all of it is it's a challenge sometimes. But definitely love all these suggestions, and I'm hearing you. Okay, so that's Gemini 2. So let's start looking at the chart. Any questions on that as we go along? I'm going to look through the chat here again and see what we have here. Thank you, Remco, for putting the Decans offering in the chat box. I appreciate that. Okay. Ooh, Remco says that he's having his solar return in this Decan. I have the full moon in Sag in my natal chart as well. Wow. Okay. So you're going to feel this one. We'll talk about that full moon for you, Remco. Jeannie, hello, Jeannie, says I have my Chiron in this Gemini second, making the T-square to my 9th house Sun, Saturn, and 12th house Jupiter, Mars, Moon. Yeah, so that might be a pain point, is trying to integrate the severed parts of yourself and find harmony and unity within. Okay, Kate says North Node and Lot of Spirit are conjoined 11th house on the Decan of my natal chart. Mercury is a bit of a challenge though, 6th house square. Yeah. So you've got some themes with the 11th house. Oh yeah, you're Leo rising, like myself. So I have the part of fortune in the 3rd Decan of Gemini, and Venus in the 2nd in the 11th. So definitely themes of bringing people together, shared visions, and things of that nature. Julie, hello, Julie says so much Gemini. Yes, a lot of Gemini. Dawn says, can you pin that so that I can jump over to it as soon as I'm off the work call? Oh yeah, Remco's got it. I think the Decans of Gemini are in the store at spencermichaud.com, and they're on sale right now. Okay, friends. So let's pull up the chart. Let's start going through it day by day. Great comments. Just keep the comments coming. Before we do that, let's just take a little stretch break. We've been here almost 50 minutes already. Do me a huge favor. Please like and subscribe. Please sign up for my newsletter. If you're new, you'll be able to see the song of the week. I usually email about once a week. I try not to spam your inbox too much. Get yourself a drink of water, get a snack, purchase the Decans videos. It's a great way to support the channel. Sign up for a reading. You know, I always love getting to know you better. All sorts of different offerings. There's a natal mythos reading where we go over your lifelong story. There's a Kairos reading where we're going over your transits. I have an oracle reading where I work with a specific issue or question. And I always include Decan work, an animal spirit, an I-Ching. I really try to integrate multiple systems of divination, but it's rooted in solid astrology, I hope. But I look at things through many different lenses, and that hopefully helps me get to essence. That's just part of my process. All right, thank you, Remco. No, you're not spamming. You're doing the Lord's work in the chat here, friend. Okay, let's open the chart up and we'll go through the first part of the month. So you can see here's June 1st. This is midnight in my location, Midwest of the United States, Eastern time. And just getting the lay of the land here, you know, the sun is starting off for you fixed star enthusiasts. It's starting off very close to Aldebaran, the eye of the bull. And that fixed star is a royal fixed star of Persia, where we are having our integrity tested. So the beginning of the month is a integrity test, you know, where we're trying to figure out how do we stay true to our ideals? How do we stay organized as well? There's some myths and themes about having a sort of almost like a military organizational structure potentially. That's from the myth of Ahura Mazda. If you're curious, you can learn more about that in Bernadette Brady's work. Mars will be in Leo. So as I'm recording this, we're ending our time of Mars in Cancer, which couldn't come soon enough for me. I'm ready for it to be gone. Again, Mars took my beard yesterday, just through like an accidental, like, I don't know, it was just through perfectionism, really. I had trimmed it, and then there was some other stuff that I was like, oh, I didn't get that part, and I just went, zoop, and I was like, oh man, I had to get rid of it. But so it goes. So it goes. Thank you, Dawn, for that super sticker. Appreciate you, friend. We're starting off with Venus in Cancer, last degrees of Cancer before it moves into Leo. We've got Mercury in Taurus. Uranus has just moved into the third decan of Taurus at the end of May. So this is a little bit of shift of the Uranian energy. We had Uranus doing some shocking lightning bolt type events in the second decan that have to do with our rhythms and routines and how we share resources with one another, how we support people financially or have other people support us like beneficiaries. But now I'm sighing heavily because I'm not really looking forward to this Uranus in this decan, because this decan, there's a lot of challenges with natural disasters, forces of nature, atoning for mistakes that we've made, which that could be the positive part. Maybe we'll have innovative solutions for atoning for some of the challenges that we've created for ourselves through rashness or just through our ignorance. But I do think that Uranus, through going through Taurus 3, we're probably going to see some more unexpected weather stuff. I'm kind of bracing myself for the summer now that we're dead smack in the middle of, like, climate change. Is whenever it gets to be summer in the northern hemisphere here, you're just bracing yourself for the severe weather seasons that are to come. And I hope that we're able to find innovative solutions to that as we move forward through this, because I think it's going to be a pretty hot summer, at least in America. I think it's a La Nina year or something like that. I could be mistaken, but I guess I would prepare in advance, have your emergency backup plans, all of that in advance for some challenges, depending on what the severe weather might look like in your area. It's going to look different for different people. Like for us in the Midwest, it could be severe heat, could be drought in your area. It could be, ocean-based things like hurricanes if you live in Florida or in other areas like that. So just be prepared, I would say, especially with Uranus moving in that decan. Jupiter is in Taurus, right? So this Jupiter and Mercury in Taurus at the beginning of the month. And we start off the month with Jupiter conjoining the North Node. So this is a very expansive energy. We are going through and coming up on this weekend a big T-square with Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto. And as we get through this weekend and the next few weeks, that energy will start to separate, but we're still going to be feeling this tension that comes up in whole sign. Now, I've talked about this last week, but Jupiter in Taurus 1 is all about planning, okay? It's saying that if you want to create honor and merit in your life, you want to create abundance and expansion, you need to have a plan. This is why I encourage you also to have a backup plan also, like an emergency plan. You need to have a business plan and an emergency plan moving forward this summer. And Jupiter is really going to be asking us to really expand our planning, probably due to a fear of scarcity. There is events coming, and I've already been starting to experience this in my personal life, and I don't feel like going into detail on this channel today about that, but there's situations that are coming up for myself and for other people in my life where it's important to make plans for the future. And some of that could be fear of loss, right? The problem with Taurus, not the problem, but the challenge with Taurus is one of inertia. Sometimes it's hard to get moving. Sometimes it's hard to get off our butts and do stuff. I'm saying our because I have the moon here in midheaven here. And oftentimes what motivates me is like, oh no, I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to lose my sense of security and comfort. I better get my ass moving, right? So if you have a situation like that in your life, like especially that comes up with this, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto square, it's important to start planning. I think that, again, I told my partner today, with some of the challenges we're facing, like, hey, we're really powerful manifestors when we really put our mind to something, when we plan, when we are unified in our sense of purpose rather than doubting ourselves. And that type of, faith, Jupiter, right? Faith in the process is going to help you get through this, because Jupiter's in the overcoming position to Mars. It has the upper hand on Mars. So if you plan, I think you're going to avoid the worst of this manifestation. But look at this like grand cross with the moon that's happening in the beginning of the month. There's just a lot of tension in the beginning of the month. So increase your ability to make plans. That's a Mercury ruled decan, the first decan of Taurus. Super important to, make plans for the future, bring order and organization. And again, Venus will be back in bounds. So you may wake up from like a stupor where you're like, oh my God, what were we thinking? We need to just get real about this, right? Lisa says, Mars in Cancer, not my favorite experience either. Yeah, I know. It's been tough for a lot of folks. A lot of domestic discord has been coming up. And, many people's lives that I've been talking to and interacting with. And Dawn says, "You look so young." Well, thank you, Dawn. Part of the reason that I actually keep the beard is that I do have a little bit of a baby face, and I like the gravitas that the extra inch of beard gives my chin, just the a sense of authority. But hopefully, my essence will bring gravitas, not just the hair on my face. Hopefully, but yeah, I've been moisturizing a little bit too, so I'll take that as a compliment, Don. Remco says we get smooth young Spencer today. The lion shaved his mane. Oh man, that's another thing. Like as a Leo rising, I enjoy just having the hair, the mane, and I feel a little naked without it. But so it goes. It's going to grow back. And I'll tell you what, the other reason why I normally have a beard is I really dislike shaving. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's uncomfortable. It makes my skin feel weird. And I'm probably just going to have a beard by the next 2 times you see me again, just because I'm like, I don't want to shave. So I trim it so it doesn't get crazy. Although, and this is my last digression, if you do want to see my crazy like midlife crisis depression beard, go back like to 2016 or so on my Instagram feed. You can see that I had a beard that was like 1.5 feet long. it was crazy. But anyway, Steven's gonna shave off his goatee and stash. Yeah, let's all just have a fresh start, right? Like, Prudence, and so now we have the feedback on the nature challenges. Prudence says, I hear that a lot of wildfires happening in my province. Yeah. West Coast, especially, fire risk out there is really, really challenging for a lot of you folks in California and Pacific Northwest for sure, and West Coast of Canada, which I think, Prudence, is that where you're at right now? Monique says we're going to get El Nino out here for some time, so more water in the fall and winter. Yeah, I knew it was one of those years where there was challenging weather patterns that could really just bring us some extreme weather for sure. Yeah, Beth saying, I was thinking about that, Prudence. The first I heard of it was an air quality warning today. Right, Beth, you're out there too. So just be prepared, friends. It's not something where you just can't live your life, but ignoring the reality of extreme weather in your area is a recipe for disaster. Preparedness can't always protect you completely from misfortune, but it can definitely help you weather the storm much easier. So just consider that as you're going through your month here. Let's see. Oh yeah, Monique, you're in what, like LA or something? You don't do weather. Get ready to deal with some weather, I bet. Lisa says, I have Moon and Uranus in the last decan of Leo and Mars in the last decan of Scorpio, so I'm going to have a big T-square happening. Well, Lisa, buckle up. And try not to get too fixed in your position. I think that flexibility is really important. Adaptability is really important when we're dealing with this fixed T-square. Don't be afraid of making changes. Some things coming up in my own life ambiguously here. I'll vague book about it. But there's just some changes that need to happen that have been on the table and on the docket for a long period of time. And there's been some fear around making those changes. But it's just time. And it will take more effort and energy to continue on the path that we've been heading down in a certain area than it would be to make the change. And a lot of this, to contextualize this, I think, is due to the eclipse that we recently had in Scorpio, where we're just needing to move on from an emotionally, codependent relationship where it might be toxic. And it doesn't have to be just a romantic relationship. We have all sorts of relationships in our life, and just pulling back into your sense of self and your sense of peace and letting go of a relationship that just isn't vital anymore and isn't bringing you peace and joy could be something that just really starts to liberate you from that tension and that stress. So consider flexibility when it comes to that, and faith in the process to be able to change. Just keep looking through the chat here. So many good chats. I'm trying to keep up with you all today. Dawn says torrential downpours here in the Gulf Coast already. Oh boy. Yeah, Florida. I don't, yeah, in Florida, Dawn, like, or Texas or something like that. I don't know. Um, I get really nervous going down there. My family used to have a condominium in the Florida Keys. Um, my mom and my stepdad had a place down there, and they came about it just very randomly, like um, back in the '70s. So it was when stuff down there was a lot cheaper, and I get real nervous about them if they go down there. Like when my mom used to go down there, and when my stepdad goes down there, like there's a lot of hurricane stuff, and their place has been hit by a couple already. Steven says, weird, that song Heat Wave came to mind this morning by Martha and the Vandellas. I've been seeing a lot of news stories, Steven, about how we could be experiencing extremes of heat this summer. And that might even be reflected in the Mars moving through Leo, and then the Venus retrograde also in fire signs. So yeah, I agree. I think that is coming. You guys are sharing all these good things about your charts. I love it. Just looking for questions, and it says, I love when your Leo shows. It's adorable. Well, thanks, Don. I think you're talking to me. Try. Let's see. Wow, so many great comments in the chat here today. Oh, you shave your head, Kate. Yeah, I had to do that I did that last summer. I think I had a really challenging experience where I was trying to trim my own hair, and then I did it a little bit too, or I let my daughter trim my hair, and she kind of screwed it up, and then I just shaved myself bald. That was when Mars was like right on my ascendant. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. But okay, let's keep going. Oh geez. Remco. Oh, Remco pulled up my crazy mane beard in 2016. Thanks, Remco, for that. I appreciate that. You can see that in the chat if you're curious. You're funny, Remco. Okay, so let's keep going, because we're on day 1 of June here, and we're just going down all these things, and we're at an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, so day 1, Venus back in bounds, Jupiter on the North Node. Okay, when we get to the 2nd, and over the course of the next few days, in the beginning of the month, Venus is going to be applying to a trine to Neptune. Okay, so again, this could be something where we are trying to. We may crave some luxuries that are a little bit out of our reach. That's the 3rd decan of Cancer, and so we're attracted to having luxurious tastes. We may feel dissatisfied with what we have. You can see in the 4 of Cups a figure that is being handed more, and they're just like, no, I've had enough, right? So knowing when enough is enough. Questions of scarcity versus luxury come up in that decan. When we have the trine with Neptune, it can be easy to maybe go a little bit too far, and we may be realizing we've gone a little too far with Venus out of bounds as well. And this might be a little bit of hopefully a reality check with the trine. But also sometimes Venus Neptune aspects just bring a really beautiful, Venusian experience, like something where it's just a very idyllic experience. Maybe if it's hot around this time, spending some time near water or a lake or something like that, I think that can really be healing. Okay, let's see. Remco. Oh boy. Yeah, I have a 20 or 30-second delay in the comments, so if I'm reading things that are a little bit behind, it's because I have a delay that I can't really fix on the comments without slowing everything down on the broadcast. But yeah, that's good. I'll take the. I don't know if it's an L with the big beard and the long hair, but that was definitely my Mufasa phase. Okay, so we do something nice for yourself with Venus and Neptune without overspending or being unrealistic about your resources, because this is leading us up to this full moon. So here's the full moon, and I'll just go to the full moon. This is June 3rd, full moon. And we've got the separating Venus-Neptune aspect. Maybe we're trying to get a reality check, right? We are dealing with the second decan of Gemini Sun. So we have an awareness of some dualities, of being split in a Mars-like fashion in many different directions, House of Mercury. But the moon is going to be trying to challenge us to unify body and spirit to achieve a singular goal. So there may be some tension between feeling like you're split in a lot of different directions, but having to utilize your sense of, I don't know, passion. I don't know if passion's the right word. This is that decan of Sagittarius, the second decan of Sagittarius, where the moon is becoming full. It tests your mettle. It says, are you going to be able to keep fighting to achieve that singular goal? Are you going to be able to unify body and spirit to achieve the goal? So that may be something that you're facing. There may be also a test too, where you have to overcome some kind of nemesis, whether it's a physical one or a mental one. When I pray to Ganesh in the beginning of the day, I always ask Ganesh, who is a remover of obstacles, to open the road and to remove obstacles that are both inherent in the path and ones that are internally generated. Because I have found in my life that the things that really hold me back as a 12th house person oftentimes are in my own mind, in my own experience. And when I finally kind of feel unified within, I can be a very, very powerful force. And that's something that I think is really to lean into in this full moon, is how can you just remove the obstacles that are stopping you from doing what that you really want to do and what you really desire, right? How can you move forward here? And Mercury is going to be hosting that Sun at 19 degrees of Taurus, and Jupiter is going to be hosting the moon at 4 degrees of Taurus as well. So very Taurus full moon, even though both of those planets are in aversion to the moon. Okay, we do have in the beginning of June, one of the biggest aspects that's happening by whole sign is Saturn's overcoming square to the sun. So we may feel limited a little bit by the mythology that we have told ourselves, where Saturn says, get real about the inner dialogue and narrative that you've shaped your entire life around. Some of those dreams are going to have to die. Some of the dreams need to become more realistic. They need to become real and stop being just dreams, and that may put some tension on our normal desire to explore many different directions. We have to eliminate some possibilities with the Saturn Sun square, I think, this month. And that's going to be part of this full moon also, is trying to eliminate some possibilities so that we can just achieve what is most important to us. I'm trying to keep up with all you. It's such a good chat. Okay. So let's move forward. I will do an entire live stream the week before the full moon, probably the last week of May, maybe next week. No, not next week. I can't even keep up anymore. What week is it? Where are we? Where am I? Maybe it will be next week. Yeah, I think that the full moon live stream will be next week. So if you want to get a deeper dive into that, tune in next week and I'll go through it. The lunations keep shifting, so I always have to try to figure out when the most appropriate time to do it, so I give people some advance notice. All right, so now we get to past the full moon. And keep in mind, this full moon, the moon is going to be out of bounds, okay? So it's going to be an emotional time. Oftentimes the moon out of bounds, where we just push our bodies too hard. Maybe we're just thinking too much and we're not getting enough sleep, and then we try to push our bodies. Like, just listen to some bees around this period of time and try to reunify, get into that hive mind once again, try to relax. Okay. So we get to the 4th, and this is also pertinent for that full moon experience, is that Mercury will be applying to a conjunction with Uranus. So part of that full moon story also is going to include having to really, you know, come to terms with some new outside the box thinking to be able to understand the consequences of your actions, whether they are past actions or preparing against challenges in the future. Um, we're going to ask a lot of questions about how are we going to be prepared if a disaster hits? How are we going to be prepared if we're losing either a source of income or a source of security, or that there's a major change that may threaten that? You think about that in your own life. Is there some changes that you've just really honestly have been needing to make for a long time, but you've just been afraid to do it, and it's just impossible to ignore it anymore. You might have to really get curious. You might have to shake things up a little bit, and it might be a little uncomfortable at first. That's what, excuse me, I'm seeing with this Mercury conjoining Uranus, is there's some discomfort, but there might also be some unexpected insights that help you to have an innovative viewpoint in averting a disaster in the future, and also atoning for your mistakes. I talked about this last week when I talked about the new moon in this decan, third decan of Taurus. And I admitted a failing that I had had in losing my temper in an experience where I was feeling a lot of discomfort. And since that time, as I said in the beginning of the show, I thought about that. I thought about, how can I fix this? How can I repent in my own way and restore equilibrium and balance and harmony? And it literally manifested as facing the challenge rather than ignoring it and apologizing, right? And even if there was a little, if there's a little part of you, if you have some Leo pride where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have to be apologizing for this. If I'm honest, there's a little part of me that was like, oh man, this is galling to apologize. But it was worth it because it helped restore peace and harmony. Getting a Leo type person to apologize is really difficult. Like it is a sign that very much it appreciates being able to save face. We can apologize, but one of the problems that we have is that, like, let's say you have in my life, I've had some Scorpionic people where we got into conflicts, and eventually I tried to apologize, and one apology wasn't enough. And that's a mistake you can make with your Leo folks, because the Scorpio people in your life, oftentimes what I've found is they don't want an apology. They want groveling, and that's not what we do. So if you have a Leo person who's screwed up, and just have some extra compassion for them, and let them save a little bit of face. If you just have a situation where anybody's pride has been engaged, allowing someone to save face can really be a healing situation. If you try to just completely eviscerate someone, if you just, are trying to just ground them into dust, eventually what that might do is you might just get the opposite of what you really want. Like, and if what you want is peace, that could just increase the tension and reignite the conflict. Okay. So, and I understand what you want is a sincere apology. And if you are a person who has a lot of pride, make a real apology, not like a half-assed one, but then try to let it go with these fixed placements, right? Try not to just hold on to that anger forever. And this is a good lesson for Scorpio type placements. And I'm speaking lesson wise to the Leo people too, is Scorpio holds on to anger because they're holding on to old forms, and you have to compost the old form, right? And you have to release the illusion of what you thought things could be. And this is what that last eclipse was teaching us, is we have to release the old forms and not feel bitter about it, right? Because that bitterness eventually is going to get turned on ourselves. And when we lose interest in stinging somebody after they're dead, really, that's really what it amounts to. You've stung someone so much with that Scorpio tail that they're already dead. What you really end up doing is you start turning that poisonous stinger on yourself. And that that gets really unhealthy. And do yourself a favor, forgive someone in your life and forgive yourself and let it go, you know? And this doesn't just apply to people who have Leo, Scorpio placements. This applies to everybody who's going through a Scorpio, Leo transit that we are going through and are about to go through significantly with this T square. And if you count the nodes, maybe it's a grand cross. I saw Ann Ortley talk about that on an IG Live the other day. I love Ann Ortley, but she was talking about the Eastern astrologers considering these points planets. And I don't necessarily do that in my work. I don't consider them planets, but they definitely are part of the conversation. I'm not sure that they aspect the same way as planets, but I do know that when a planet is making an aspect to those nodes, there are significations that we can glean. And especially as these planets are moving towards the bendings of the nodes. We have Mars in the end of the month of May going through the bending of the south bending of the nodes of the moon, where it's moving away from the north node and towards the south node, towards release. We're going to have Venus going through this south bending in June as well. So consider June or early July. It's in my notes somewhere. No, it's in June. So we're really trying to release the past in a lot of ways, in a lot of different circumstances. Okay, I'm just checking in on the chat here. I love that you all are having side conversations with each other. This is great. Just seeing the community come together and support each other. It's great. I love this group. Yeah, and Beth's like, damn straight, narcissists need groveling, gross. Yeah, groveling is, it's just so toxic. And I think that, again, your compassion will allow you to see the humanity in the other person, even if they've hurt you. You know, that's really where the kindness comes in and the face saving comes in, right? And sometimes if you have a problem with someone, trying not to make the correction such a public affair can really lead to better solutions too. I learned this as a community college teacher, is if I was having a problem with a student, calling them out in front of the rest of the class really was a bad idea, unless they did something that was very much hurting another student. And in the moment, I would have to like set a boundary, but then I would have to talk with them afterwards and allow them to save face in front of their peers, because especially with young people, like their ability to look good in front of their peers is really important. Like they're really concerned about that. Everybody's concerned about that, but you're more so when you're younger, I think, sometimes. And I just got a lot better reactions when I pulled someone aside after class, or, you know, and was able to talk it out when it wasn't so public. So think about that as well as a way to allow people to save face. Jeannie says, what to do with the void if we forgive? Venus conjunct Pluto in Scorpio and Mercury in Scorpio as well. Jeannie, that is a great question. What to do with the void? I will answer that in speaking about the transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius. The act of separation that is required in Scorpio, which is a Mars-ruled sign, Mars severs and separates, is separating spirit or intention from a body and returning it to the earth. In the northern hemisphere, it's associated with compost of fall, returning forms to the earth. What you are doing is you are liberating that energy to find a new goal, a new body, a new transformative form. So what do, Jeannie? You rise from the ashes like the phoenix. This is where we get the phoenix energy with Scorpio. You find a new passion. You let go of that old form willingly, and you will be reborn. There is a rebirth with it. You don't stay in the void. We don't stay in the birth canal, right? Just like we don't want to stay in the liminal space of Gemini before birth. We need to choose a lot and move on. You move on. You live in the moment rather than the past. And this is a hard thing for some Scorpio placements, because that whole second decan of Scorpio is related to nostalgia and the pain of return. So you appreciate those times for what they were, and then you let them go. So it is practicing present moment awareness rather than getting stuck in things that happened in the past. And as far as what can you do, oftentimes clearing the clutter out in your house, if there's something that reminds you of that person, that can be really healing. Just getting rid of stuff. If things have energy with it, just let it go. Take a picture of it if you need some reminder of it, then get rid of it. And then you'll be opening space up for new things to come into your life. Kim Nagayan, I think that's how you say it. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, Kim. Speaking to the choir, I'm a Scorpio Sun, rising Mercury in Uranus. Yeah, so I have a lot of messaging for you Scorpio folks out there. And I love my Scorpio friends. I emphasize friends. As a Cancer Sun, I have a lot of Scorpio folks in my life, but I've made some Scorpionic enemies in the past, and that's been very, very painful. As a Leo rising, I've had some really tough relationships with Scorpio risings in particular, but some other Scorpionic folks, and there's no going back when you get a lion digging his heels in the pride area, and a scorpion like digging their heels in the I'm gonna crush and destroy. It's just really, it gets really ugly, and I really hope to avoid that moving forward, because it's not worth it. At the end of the day, nobody wins, Dawn says, I have Venus, Mars, Jupiter in the 12th. Forgiveness and compassion took a long time to learn. Yeah, amen. It does. This is part of the reason we're here, is to learn, and it doesn't always happen overnight. Yeah, in Scorpio. Yep, I get it. Stephen has Jupiter and Scorpio in the 12th. Saturn opposing. Oh boy, yeah. So there's a lot of lessons with this here too. Dawn says, ask spirit to fill it with light and peace. That's what I do. That's great advice, Dawn. This is where our faith comes in, right? This is where we try to rise above. And another symbol of Scorpio is the eagle, right? Rising above the lower base emotions and just not letting it affect you anymore, just being able to see it objectively. The eagle brings us the lesson of objectivity, I think, on some level. Okay. Yeah, Jeannie. Appreciate it. So let's keep going. So that's June 4th. We've got the Mercury Uranus conjunction. When we get to June 5th, we have a big change. We have Venus moving into Leo and joining Mars. So a lot of the themes that I've been talking about pride, get activated even further with Venus here. And the experience that we're going to have between the 5th and the 8th is we're going to activate that T-square that we are experiencing with Mars, Pluto, and Jupiter, but now Venus is part of the conversation. Now that could potentially be good. Venus could be trying to soothe some of the challenges, so there could be some relief in that. On the flip side, the Venus area of your life that Venus rules, Libra and Taurus, may be going through its own catharsis. Venus in Leo, especially the first 10 degrees, is related to the 5 of Wands. 5, 6, 7 of Wands in Leo, right? And when we have Venus moving into Leo, we see an attraction towards either competition or the spotlight, or even sometimes a fear of it. Like this is Saturn ruled Decan that Venus and Mars will be moving through in the beginning of the month. And T. Susan Chang, who I love, talks a lot about the pressure cooker, where we're almost being forced into the limelight, and it's uncomfortable because we're trying to try on different masks, and we're trying to try on different personas and understand what using our will is all about. So there could be some challenges where you're feeling a little bit exposed from behind the veil, much like I am today, exposed from behind the beard, like with my beard gone. But at the end of the day, the core essence of yourself is still there, whether your appearance has changed or not. and that's a good lesson for Venus opposite Pluto. And again, Venus is going to be heading towards the south bending, which happens on the 8th. Okay, so this is leading us to a change where we're moving from a place of expansion to probably to a contraction phase in either the Leo part of our life, or also because Venus is providing for Taurus and Libra in those topical houses as well. Okay, so there may be some changes where you're going to have to let go. Like there may be some more relationship things, the more desires that you have where you have to let go because your personal subjective desires are coming into conflict with the needs of the collective, right? And that isn't always fun. It can be painful. It's really important with Venus opposite Pluto that you release the desire to manipulate others. If you're jealous or if you want something that someone else has but you can't have it, and resist the urge to use underhanded methods to get what you want. And again, pride is really a mask for insecurity. A Leo that is healthy does not really give a shit if you like them or not, right? I think this is what I've come to, is when I'm feeling really good, I do not care if people applaud or not. Like, I'm just going to be me and you can take it or leave it. It doesn't mean I have to insist that other people follow as well. But the truly secure people are the ones that are just like, you know what? I'm going to be me. You can be you. And we'll just continue to live our lives. It's one of the really great benefits of working with Regulus materia. I have some oil from Caitlin Kopic and Spear and Sundry, and wear Regulus oil quite a bit. And really the gift and the things you ask for with that is grant me the confidence that's unreliant on external validation that will also magnetize it, you know? So it's funny how that works. And that's been something I've been really leaning into, is not insisting that others follow. Okay. Just looking through the chat again. Yeah, just Steven's saying meditation and journaling has helped fill the void too, the scorpionic void. I agree with that. I'm a lifelong journaler myself. Okay. So another point of tension with Mars, and Venus coming together, opposing Pluto, and squaring all of this Taurus energy. The other thing that I will point out, that once we get to the actual bending of the nodes, okay, where Venus is at roughly 3 degrees of Leo, okay, squaring the north and south node in Scorpio and Taurus respectively, Mercury is going to be very, very close to Algol, the fixed star Algol. And that is interesting because this could be something where we are having a really difficult conversation where we may, hopefully, if we can maintain our composure, it'll bring us the types of solutions that will lead us to remedying the challenges. On the flip side, it could be very easy to lose control verbally and emotionally around this period of time, especially with Venus at the bending, where you're just like, I'm sick of this, I'm done, I'm over it, it's enough, And what I will say is that, again, violence is never the answer for things of that nature, right? If you have to be severe with your own self-control and try to find a solution where you can make a parting as harmonious as possible. It's not always in the cards, but you get to decide what type of person you want to be when you are trying to move on, right? When you are trying to release something, you get to decide how you're going to stay in integrity. because ultimately you're just creating more problems for yourself if you lose control. I've learned this the hard way. I'm telling you. That was why I did what I did with my neighbor. I realized that I went home after, if in the moment it felt good. It felt good to be like, fuck off, stop harassing me. But afterwards I was like, oh no. What I've done is I've just given this person extra motivation to continue on in the behavior, right? I didn't solve anything. And that's what caused me to reevaluate and to try a different approach. And that's really a lot of what I think the best expression of Taurus 3 is being able to reevaluate the behavior that you've already gone through and try to make a different decision that will bring harmony. It is still a Taurus decan. It's a Venus, still a Venus sign. Ultimately, Tauruses aren't really hip on conflict. They would love nothing more than just to be left alone. And I realized that I would never be able to feel like I could peacefully go for a walk in my neighborhood and relax if we were just perpetuating conflict over and over and over. Does that make sense? So consider that with Mercury on Algol and Venus at the bending of the nodes here. Okay, let's keep rolling. On the 9th, we're getting to the end of the second decan of Gemini here. On the 9th, there is a supportive sextile between Mercury and Neptune. So this is something where we might just feel like we need to let go. We probably got some good ideas about how to fix something, and we just have to kind of go with the flow a little bit. Like we have to release some of our fixed position and dissolve some of the tension. I think Neptune at its best can dissolve the boundaries that keep us in the illusion of separation, right? I've been you're thinking about that with like the bees and like the hive mind and feeling this illusion of separation. I'm trying to think. There was a show that I was watching recently where, and I'm seeing if it'll just come to me. It was either a movie or a show where they were really talking about the illusion of separation. Maybe it'll come to me at a different point in the broadcast here. But there was a character in that show that was going through this feeling where they were feeling separate, but it was definitely just a mask, right? And that's something that I think Neptune sometimes teaches us, is the illusion of our separation. Yeah. Oh, that's what it was. It was Rick and Morty. It was Rick and Morty. And there was an episode where Morty gets into a video game. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen season 6 yet. And he's split into many different NPCs, non-playable characters. So he's still him, but he is split into many different individuals, which is a meditation on sort of religious thinking about how we may be one, but we are split into these individual points of consciousness. And that particular episode just took you on a journey, and a really meditative journey around some of those issues and challenges. And it's go check it out. It's on HBO Max or whatever if you're looking for that. It's where Morty and Rick are in a video game. All right, so we end Gemini 3 on the 10th with a quarter moon, the last quarter moon in particular. So here is last quarter moon. Let me just get it a little bit more more exact here. At about 19 degrees of Gemini and Pisces. So there's the sun at 19 Gemini and the moon at 19 degrees of Pisces. So last quarter moons, they're releasing light. They're a crisis, an existential crisis point, where we're trying to tie up some loose ends, shift our perspective so that we can plant the seed for the next new moon. And remember, this lunation cycle starts today, right? This will be the kind of tying up the loose ends of this new moon that we're experiencing. We'll have the full moon of this cycle on the 3rd, and then the last quarter on the 10th. And whatever remediation solutions that we're coming up with today and over the weekend and the last weeks of May, and unifying towards a collective purpose and goal and trying to overcome the division, the inner division that we are experiencing, the illusion of separation. Then we get to this last quarter where we sort of have to get, we have to remove some of the final internal obstacles to our happiness, right? This is something that Austin talks about in 36 Faces in regards to the moon in the second decan of Pisces, the waning moon. This is good for removing internal obstacles to our happiness. And you can see that the sun in the second decan of Gemini is really torn, split, nightmare, anxiety, insomnia. Second decan of Pisces is really about satisfaction. It's about saying this is good enough. This is, maybe it's not perfect, but here's how I find a sense of peace. So that might be something to think about as we get to the end of this decan, is how can you maintain your inner peace? What internal dialogues can help with your external situation? All right. Let's take another break before we get into Gemini 3. I'm going to stop my share here and just kind of take a look at the chat. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on Friday. It's always such an honor to see all of you here. Make sure you stretch and get a snack and get a drink of water. Stretch your body out. Do some yoga. Dimpy sent me some good videos. I can't really do those right now because a lot of them require you going on the floor, but this is one for my shoulders. You can probably hear my shoulders crack. There it is. Yep. Okay. Get the blood flowing and get a little drink. Use the loo if you are so inclined. All right. Eat a couple macadamia nuts here. I've been buying expensive nuts to feed to my squirrel buddy, but I need to make sure I'm, putting my own oxygen mask on first. I love macadamia nuts. They're very tasty. Okay, I'm just looking through the chat. My goodness, you all are awesome and active. Do me a favor, friends. Please like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want to buy a super chat or a super sticker, I always appreciate those. Sign up for a reading. Sign up for the email list. Pardon my chewing. Steven's asking, eclipse season is over? As of today, I think it is. Which is funny, huh? Kind of crazy. We've been through it, haven't we? That doesn't mean the effects of that eclipse are completely over with, but the actual Bardo period, or whatever you want to consider it, the in-between phase, we're starting a new thing. Starting a new thing today. I do think we have one more eclipse in Scorpio Taurus axis later on in the year, but then the nodes are going to be shifting to Aries and Libra, and that's going to bring some change too. That's in July. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. Oh, Remco's taking off. Got a headache? Sorry, bud. Thanks for sharing today, Remco, and for doing the great work that you always do. And we'll keep on rolling. I'm just looking to see if there's questions or something. No, I don't mind you all blowing up the chat, Dawn. I I actually appreciate it. So the more the merrier. I'm just making sure that I didn't miss anything that I needed to respond to. Sometimes it's hard to tell if the comments are directed towards me or towards each other. I guess one easy thing to do is if there is a question, you could put my name in like capital letters or something, or put question in capital letters, and that always helps me to find it. Or you can do a super question or whatever. Sometimes if you really want your thing highlighted, if you make a donation, it'll highlight it. Not saying you have to do that for me to answer a question, but it does help me see it. Okay, let's keep going. Here's what I'm going to do next. I am going to pull up the Decans of Gemini once again, and we're going to talk a little bit about the third decan. So this is Gemini 3. Again, Decans of Gemini is on sale right now, 20% off, and it's the final days of the sale from for Taurus. But this decan it's a little bit of a challenging one. Honestly, all the decans of Gemini are challenging. I think the people have Gemini all wrong in modern astrology. Gemini is tough sailing, and people who are going through the Gemini journey oftentimes, like I said, get a really bad rap. But I think it's important to have compassion for your Gemini friends too, because they're really going through it. These cards are difficult cards, and decans, there's difficult choices. We're looking at the 10 of Swords here in Gemini 3. And this is the last decan in the Thema Mundi cycle, right? Where we're renewing ourselves in the first decan of Cancer. The Egyptian New Year came in Cancer season rather than in Aries season. And there's some philosophical things attached to this. Like, this is where we just have so many options, and we finally have to just let go of one. There's stories of the twins, many twins that have to make sacrifices for one another, especially Castor and Pollux, though, in the Greek mythological system, is the immortal twin has to give up some of his immortality so that the other can live. And these are the types of choices that we have to make in this third decan of Gemini, these forced choices sometimes that we don't really have a good solution, but we just have to let go of some of the imagined pathways. You can't, to me, this card shows one of your choices that you've stuck 10 swords into. The beauty of this is that the card that comes right after it is the Two of Cups. So instead of getting fixated on what has been sacrificed, realize that you're opening energy up for just like Scorpio, for your passion to be, nurtured, like your true priorities to be nurtured into maturity. And that's really what we see with the second decan the Two of Cups, which is the first decan of Cancer, is this passion ignited, this attraction to a new idea that we want to nurture into fruition. So the themes in Gemini 3, the dusk before the dawn, the death of one choice, sacrificing imagined pathways. There were all sorts of ancient rituals regarding the death of the sun before the solstice, because the sun is switching direction. This is another reason why we have the fickleness associated with Gemini, because when it reaches the pinnacle, it changes its mind and goes in a different direction. And also the kind of the association with the crab going in different directions as well. So, we may have to make a sacrifice. We need to, I said, dropping the spinning plates, right? You just can't keep all the ideas alive, the pathways alive. This decan is one of overthinking. I think that this figure, like I said, this isn't an individual. This is the death of one particular idea or pathway, I think. And you just can't keep all of them going and expect to be successful. I think that's part of the lesson here. So releasing indecision, right? So this is the ultimate result of the paralysis we see in the beginning of Gemini, is one of the pathways needs to go. Because we're trying to keep so many open in the first decan of Gemini, we just can't go anywhere. And we have that nightmare anxiety. When we finally let go, that leads to the happiness of the second of the Two of Cups in the first decan of Cancer. So questions you can ask yourself. Which twin or option needs to die so that the other can live? And this I want to preface that or give a caveat. It says just because you let go of an option in the moment doesn't mean you can't revisit it at a later time, right? So it doesn't mean it may be just dormant also. And that's something to consider. That can relieve some anxiety about not being able to do everything if you have a lot of Gemini placements saying, well, maybe you revisit that later, okay? So which idea or twin or option needs to die so that the other can live? And that's, again, the key is focusing on the priority and what needs to live, not just on the sacrifice. Are you allowing ambiguity or making ultimatums? This was another part. This is a solar decan in the Mercury sign. And often the authors talk about all or nothing, black or white thinking, okay? And that can lead to issuing an ultimatum where you say it's you or me, and that can be destructive as well. So are you overthinking it? How can you balance hyper-rationalism with your intuition? Where do you need to release the weight of knowing too much? Okay. Oftentimes we think we know something and then life teaches us that we don't. And that humility can also be very liberating. How can you embrace closure and live with the consequences? This is a tough one, right? If you go back to that myth of by finally choosing a lot, you are sacrificing the other lives, the other lots. But at the end of the day, you are embodying into life. You're being reborn. So by finally choosing, it allows you to live again. Okay, so that's something to consider. How do you embrace closure so that you can live with the consequences, but just live life? Okay, and then can you surrender to love and infuse life into your highest priority? That's the transition we are speaking of, from the Ten of Swords to the Two of Cups. Okay. And, there's all sorts of stuff that you can learn about with the decans here. This is the thing about this particular decan. There's like 10 fixed stars that have astrological meaning in that last decan of Gemini. So it's funny to me because it's like, oh, too many thoughts, too many ideas, too many directions. It's like, oh, too many fixed stars. So there's all the fixed stars in Orion. There's some stuff in Taurus in there as well. And we'll break that down a little bit too. But yeah, I go through all of that in depth in the Decan webinar itself. Okay, just looking through the chat. Oh, Don's moon is in this decan, and it explains a lot. Yes, sometimes it does, doesn't it? So I thought it was interesting. I just thought it was interesting when I started looking into out of bounds that my moon is in Gemini out of bounds and my Mercury out of bounds. And that's why I could never shut up. Oh, Don. I mean, at the end of the day, exploration is part of Gemini experience. And communication is important too. And so I wouldn't feel guilty about it, Don. I think it's just you just got to own it. And also don't get stuck in the exploration phase. Try to pick your priorities in the moment. Okay. So let's go back to the chart and look at what we're experiencing for this 10-day section. So we're looking at the period of time from June the 11th to June 21st. So the first thing that happens on June 11th, if we go to the kind of early hours of this, is Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn. So check this out. So this is, we've already gotten a taste of Pluto in Aquarius, and I've talked a little bit about that on this channel. There are multiple manifestations of it. It's a super long transit, 20 plus years. I do think that dual themes of climate change, artificial intelligence, all these types of things where we're having to question what it means to be human are part of the story. But when Pluto moves back into Capricorn, there's some loose ends that we have to tie up when it comes to how we govern each other, how we take authority, how we organize the material structures of our societies. And I think that we've been rooting out some corruption with that in the recent past, hopefully, but there's still more work to be done. And I think that this is part of Pluto moving into Capricorn here. So, reviewing responsibilities. How do we manage our material resources? Perhaps more corruption exposed through the authority figures in our lives. There's been some people in American politics that have been going through a lot of lawsuits and things like that, and people are learning all sorts of things, and corruption is being exposed. And I'm sure that that's going to be part of this conversation as we move forward with Pluto and Capricorn. Excuse me. All right, some of you have to go, so take care if you have to go, and I'll be here, and you can listen on the recording. Have a good one, Dawn. Okay. So that's the first thing that we experience as you see the sun moving into 20 degrees of Gemini here. Just as Pluto retrogrades into Capricorn, and I'll move it back even a little bit further here, you see that Mercury is making a trine to Pluto just before moving into Gemini in the early hours of June 11th in Eastern Standard Time here, daylight time, whatever the hell it is. So just one final exposure of something, like maybe we've dug deep into the problem, and now it's time to figure out some solutions. Okay. It was interesting that in my honeycomb planner, which sometimes I rely on the honeycomb planner to look at all the aspects for the month, it said at 30 degrees like of Taurus and 30 degrees of Capricorn, which is that even possible? I feel like it's, there isn't really a 30 degree. I mean, it's just, what it tells me is it's the last possible place that it can be for each of these signs, which I find kind of fascinating. And I'm not exactly sure what that brings up, but there is some theories around anaretic degrees being very important and very kind of like moments of phasis, omens that speak, intensification. So there may be some messages that we're receiving about some corruption that needs to be dealt with in late June 10th and early June 11th. And then Mercury moves into Gemini. So when Mercury moves into Gemini, as you can see here, now we are experiencing a proliferation, right? We have a lot of questions. Maybe there's an exposure of some kind of corruption in our collective, and we have a lot of questions about it. And we're like, okay, what the hell are we going to do now? And we may feel again that paralysis by analysis energy coming up. This is a Jupiter-ruled decan, so Mercury in a Jupiter decan. But Mercury is returning to its home of Gemini. Like, this is something where it's comfortable exploring. Communication may get faster. We may find our attention being split in a lot of different directions. I guess the good news about Mercury moving into Gemini is that it will be the host of the sun. So now the sun has a powerful Mercury to draw upon, where it is witnessing Mercury now by being co-present. So we're able to ask the right questions. Whereas we may have some confusion about which questions to ask when the sun's moving through Gemini and in aversion or not able to witness its host, Mercury. Okay. The other thing that's going on, though, is that once Mercury moves into Gemini, it starts to come into a whole sign square with Saturn. So there may be some sober conversations that need to happen with this. We may not be able to explore as many options because of the reality check that Saturn is giving us, trying to to help us understand the internal narratives and how they may be supporting us or how they may be pulling us further away from our dream. All right. Carol says, hello, Carolyn. I love the Decans webinars, purchased all of them. I'm a grad of Adam Ellenboss's first year, second year in horary classes, but Spencer's Decans are so rich. You'll love them. Well, thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you're getting some benefit out of them. I too have gone through those classes with Adam, and really helped me to set a nice foundation for the rest of the work that I've been able to do and expand with the Decans. So love Adam, and I'm so happy that you're able to get something out of the direction I've started to take my work in as well. Says, let's see. Okay. So there is even another astrological aspect on the 11th. I remember I said in the beginning of the show that June 11th, there's a lot happening. It's an active day. So just to summarize, Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn. Mercury trines Pluto as it retrogrades. Mercury changes signs and ingresses into Gemini. And then, if that wasn't enough, because that's a lot, Venus will be making a square to Jupiter. Okay. So here is Venus at about 5 degrees of Leo, and it'll square Jupiter at 5 degrees of Taurus. So this is this aspect, I was thinking about this aspect, because this could be positive. I think that there could be, even though it's a square, and we've been trained sometimes that squares are challenging, they're of the nature of Mars. I think that I would think of squares as like the friction necessary to get moving. And in Hellenistic astrology, when you have an overcoming square from a benefic planet, sometimes that's a good thing. You know, sometimes that is the type of friction that leads to beneficial outcomes. So what I was looking at with this and thinking about it with the tarot and the 5 of Pentacles energy with Jupiter and Taurus 1, and the 5 of Wands energy with Leo 1 with Venus, is that I think that there's probably a necessary plan that we have to make to create abundance that will require us to get more comfortable with our public presentation. Okay, so this is where we say, hey, you know, we have to plan for either a competition or being in the spotlight, or we have to use the spotlight to expand our material abundance and resources. And we may be feeling some pressure because we're afraid of scarcity or being poor or scared of lack. And that helps us to say, you know what, if I want to be successful, I need to become more visible. If I want to create abundance, I need to be okay with visibility. This is something I've struggled with in my life, is that I'm not, as a 12th house sun and a Cancer sun, you know, the moon and the midheaven, I'm not always actually that comfortable with visibility. I've learned that I can create the type of visibility that I feel comfortable with, and the type of environments that I've learned to protect so that we can feel like this is a safe space. But there's been other environments and situations that I've been in, especially as a professional musician, where I just felt very like, oh man, this is rough. There's certain gigs that you have where you just feel very exposed and it's very difficult. But there is growth that can happen through pushing yourself to have some courage to peek out from behind the curtain every once in a while, right? And I think that that's part of this square with Jupiter and Venus, is saying, you know what, if you want to create material abundance and security, you might have to fight for it a little bit. Like you don't have to be ruthless about it, but you may have to understand that it's okay for you to assert some of your own needs and will power to get what you desire. And yeah, I think that's a hard lesson to learn sometimes. It's hard. And to be honest with you, I think late stage capitalism has forced us into that competitive mindset, and I'm frustrated with that. So the question then becomes, how do you do this in a way that is supportive of one another rather than feeling like you have to win and someone else has to lose? I always think about that, and I'm constantly thinking about whether I'm taking away from someone else if I'm putting myself out there. And I think it's a false dichotomy. I don't think we have to I think there's enough to go around. Like, I got a nice email from a student or a participant or client, I don't know, was encouraging me to teach like a tarot class, and talking about how my teaching wouldn't necessarily take away from another teacher because it would just be another perspective. And it was nice to hear that, because it was something that I'm always conscientious about. That's why cancers often don't do super well in competitive business situations, not as well as their Capricorn compatriots might be able to do, because a Capricorn, I don't know, I'm learning to respect this energy. I used to be really off-put by it. Sometimes a Capricorn can objectively do business, right? And say, that's just the collateral damage that happens when you get in where you need to go. And as a Cancerian person, that is very uncomfortable for me. I don't like that. I want to get where I'm going with my relationships intact. That doesn't mean that if you're a Capricorn type person that you automatically step on other people to get where you need to be, but that definitely is a dark side of that energy. And the dark side of the Cancerian part of that equation is never sticking your neck out, never trying to do more things because you're afraid of hurting someone else's feelings or your own. So both of those things have balance points within them. And I think that this is, honestly part of this discussion with these two elements as well. I would also just encourage you to reel it in if you have something that you want. This Jupiter-Venus squares can cause us to be very excessive. So you may be planning excessively to put yourself out there during this period of time, right? Or over planning it, when what you just need to do is just do it. Just show up. And if you make a mistake, fine, but then you move on. Okay. So overthinking things could be part of this, especially with Venus and Gemini. Okay. So that's the 11th, a really big part of the month. An inflection point, if you will. If we move on a couple days in advance, and we get to the 15th. All right, that's our next kind of aspect that we're seeing here, the June 15th, or non-lunar aspect, I should clarify. And that's when we see Mercury starting to come into a square with Saturn. So leading up to this, if you're like, well, what's happening between the 11th and the 15th? Well, as we see Mercury starting to apply to the square to Saturn, we're probably going to be having a lot of conversations and thoughts about our responsibilities and whether our dreams are sustainable or whether we need to let them go and shift our narratives. Now, Saturn is in the overcoming position, or the overcoming square to Mercury. What that tells me is Saturn has the upper hand, just as Jupiter had the upper hand in the relationship with Venus and Mars. Now Saturn has the upper hand in the relationship to Mercury. So I think that even though we may feel a desire to continue to explore and expand our options, Saturn is saying, no, you got to choose, and that really does reflect, I think, the energy in the third decan of Gemini, where the sun is as well. It says, no, get real about your options, right? Start to get a sober look at how you may be creating an internal narrative for better or for worse. And quiet the mind a little bit. When we have a Piscean planet in the overcoming square to a Gemini planet, I really think that it's a sign or a signal to trust your intuition and your gut rather than to overthink and over hyper rationalize things. It's saying go with the flow, surrender to the process rather than trying to control the process. So I think that's what we're seeing with Mercury and Saturn here, is surrendering to a process, maybe even feeling a little bit paralyzed by our exploration and our options, but with an equal and even more powerful desire to retreat. This may also lead to a little bit of a pessimistic or worrisome type of thinking. Again, I think the solution to this is surrender to the process, not thinking about it more or staying up at night and say, oh, if I only had more ideas. I don't think the solution is more ideas. I think the solution is less. Okay. I'm just looking through the chat here. Lots of good conversation going on. Kalia, the beach. Beach. Says, what does it mean to be a 12th house person? Is it where your chart ruler is? Yeah, I'm just using that as a reference to my sun in the 12th house and having multiple placements there, Sun and Mercury, and I guess Vesta, if you want to count that. There are multiple ways you can be a quote unquote 12th house person. In my case, I have planets there, but also my ascendant ruler. So that is a double whammy, which I do think gives my chart a very 12th house flavor. You could also say I'm a 10th house type person because of my moon being in the 10th house. I think the combination of those two houses is, you're seeing it in real time, Kalia, is the sharing of challenges, analyzing a liminal space, but with a community, and a public display of feelings and emotions sometimes. Like that's really what we're doing here on the weekly. All right, so that's June 15th, the square between Mercury and Saturn. Now, when we get to the 16th, we start another moon out of bounds phase. Okay, so this is the moon out of bounds from June 16th to June 21st till the solstice. So again, this is a time where we could be feeling exhausted from all this thinking, from this Saturn Mercury type of energy, where we have to really be careful of pushing our bodies too hard and things of that nature. We get to the 17th, we have another day that has multiple aspects. So we're building from the 16th to the 18th to a new moon. And I guess that's the wrong word. We're releasing to the new moon. We're going through a balsamic releasing phase of the moon, where we're tying up loose ends and getting ready for a new start. So you may feel a little tired with that. You may, you might be releasing some options, releasing some ideas, releasing some fantasies. Okay, this could be part of this also. So on the 17th, Mercury makes a sextile to Venus. So that's supportive. So here's Mercury at 10 degrees Gemini on Aldebaran, very close to Venus by sextile at 10 degrees of Leo. So this could be something where you're having a conversation surrounding integrity. This could be something where you have some positive self-talk. You could be confident in your communication potentially. I think this is a good time to share your enthusiasm and your faith, and that might lead to some positive outcomes potentially. Now, as that happens, our friend Saturn is going to station, or is stationing, and will turn retrograde. So here's Saturn turning retrograde, okay, right here, at 7 degrees of Pisces in the afternoon. And it will be moving backwards until it stations direct on November 4th at 0 degrees of Pisces. So this is a good time to review, reassess, redo things in the Pisces area of your life, a return of something maybe, but particularly reviewing the internal mythology, the internal narratives that you craft your life around. Okay. The host will be Jupiter, or is Jupiter in this case, and it's going to be sextile Jupiter. So reviewing your material plans and whether that fits into the greater meaning and purpose of your life. Sometimes we make material plans and we're not even really thinking about the bigger picture and what it means. This is a good time to have those two things match up, to say, are these material plans that we're making a reflection of who we are and our integrity and who we want to be? Or is it a reflection of just like trying to expand our material resources? And is it making us feel out of alignment with our integrity? These are questions. It's not always an easy answer to that either. Shortly after Saturn turns retrograde, Mercury will move under the beams of the sun. Okay, so here is Mercury at about 11 degrees, moving under the beams of the sun. Right here, within 15 degrees. So this means that it is now invisible. Okay, so see this here? So this is called the morning set of Mercury. Because if we put this arrangement on the ascendant or the horizon in the morning, Mercury would no longer be visible. So this is the direct journey of Mercury into the heart of the sun. And we will have a cazimi of the sun on July 1st at 9 degrees of Cancer. So this is a moment of phasis where we're going and reconsidering something to make a new start in the Cancer area of our life. There's a choice that needs to be made to move on. There is ideas that you need to reconcile. There's dualities with the second decan that need to be reconciled. Analytical downloads or something that you could be experiencing while Mercury is under the beams of the sun. I have a friend, Gary Caton, who is a Mercury expert, I would say, and he talks about Mercury, or at least he did to me off the record at one point, about the journey of Hermes to either the underworld or to Mount Olympus, because he was a messenger between worlds. And I asked him one time, I was like, when is Mercury in the underworld and when is he visiting Olympus? And he was like, Mercury's in the underworld. This is his thought on this. Mercury is in the underworld when it's in its retrograde, invisible passage of the sun. Okay. He says it's visiting Olympus probably in this stage here, right? Where it is invisible, but it's off going into the Olympus, like trying to get ideas from the ether rather than going back into the past or in the underworld with the retrograde phase. So this might be something where just really pay attention to the ideas that you get, like a spark of awareness from the divine, because there really could be some interesting solutions that come to you while Mercury is underneath the beams. And Mercury isn't really being harmed by the beams of the sun either, because it is in its chariot. Now that's a fancy word for Mercury being in one of its dignities that is protecting it, like an awning on a chariot, an ancient awning that would protect you from the sun. So there's really some great idea explorations that could be happening behind the scenes that are worth paying attention to. Okay. And again, flexibility is really important in this area of our life. So that brings us to the new moon. So we've got a new moon on the 18th of June. I don't know why Three's Company is coming up in my brain, but maybe that's a good metaphor for whatever's going on at this new moon. Like, there's just too many people living here, too many triangulations. So let's talk about the new moon. The new moon is happening at 26 degrees of Gemini. So let's see. We have Mercury co-present with the new moon at 11 degrees of Gemini. So this is a powerful one because it is co-present with its host. We've got sextiles, positive sextiles from Venus and Mars in Leo. And we have a overcoming square from retrograde Saturn by whole sign, not necessarily aspectually by degree, but by whole sign. So everything that I've been discussing about Gemini 3, where we've had to learn how to decide what needs to be let go and what needs to stay, or what needs to be what we need to breathe life into, is going to be important at this new moon on June the 18th. Now, one of the things that I think that is super interesting about this new moon, a couple things. First of all, the moon itself will be out of bounds. So we're in the middle of an out of bounds moon period. The other thing that is super interesting to me, also, it will be squaring Neptune exactly. So we may not be able to feel a sense of immediate clarity on which option is the best, because Neptune is clouding our perception potentially and dissolving our boundaries and blending them all together. It's hard to get that clarity that sometimes Gemini tries to bring to us so we can make a choice. The other interesting thing about this new moon is that the moon will be void of course shortly after the new moon. So after the sun and moon come together at 26 degrees of Gemini, the moon will make an aspect to Saturn, a trine to Saturn at about 7 degrees of Cancer and Pisces respectively. And then it will go void of course for like 3 days, like by Hellenistic definition, until it squares Jupiter on the 21st from Leo. So between 7 degrees of Cancer and 7 degrees of Leo, between the 18th and the 21st of June, we have a Hellenistic void of course moon. And that to me shows me that this choice is not going to be resolved right away. There's just nothing's going to come of it if we try to make the decision right away. If we use the executioner's sword, like Austin Coppock describes it as in 36 Faces, we may not be, choosing the right path. So what I would suggest with this new moon in Gemini 3 is I would live into the process. The sun is going to make an exact square to Neptune shortly after the new moon. The moon's going to square Neptune. The moon's going to be going void of course. You don't have to have it all figured out right away. Even though it might feel like you have to make a choice right away, doesn't necessarily have to be done. So I hope that will give you some ability to just relax at this new moon. Because we're going to be feeling antsy. We're going to be feeling like, oh my God, we've got to choose something. One thing has to die for this other thing to live. And if you're too hasty in making that choice, it could be easy to make a mistake. So just have patience around this period of time. And you don't necessarily need to start something too early in this process. I think that the intentions that you set, you can set the intentions at the moment of the new moon if you want to, but you might not be able to act on them until later on in the week after the solstice. So what I would say is there's a little bit of a in-between period from this new moon to the solstice where things are going to get a lot clearer at the solstice, okay? So I wouldn't force yourself into the decision before that period of time. That's my practical advice for this. The good news about this new moon and like the days happening here is that there is a supportive sextile between Jupiter and Saturn. So there's 7 degrees Jupiter at 7 degrees of Taurus and Saturn at retrograde Saturn at 7 degrees of Pisces. Oops. This is sort of helping us to kind of get realistic about our plans, figuring out what's working, what isn't. And we're feeling in alignment with meaning. When Saturn is in a positive sextile with its host, there's a harmony between them. Whereas when Jupiter was in Aries, we really weren't having a conversation between the two of them. We had our own individual desires with Jupiter and Aries, and we were trying to find meaning with Saturn and Pisces, but they weren't really aligning with one another. And now we're making plans based on the meaning that we've been trying to uncover, and vice versa. The plans will help us find meaning sometimes. That's the other part of it. Okay. So that is the sun in Gemini 3. So let's move on. Let's take another short stretch break, as we should do at each of these decanic breaks, for the sake of my back and my hips. Movement is important, friends, especially when we spend this much time together. We need to make sure we're moving and we're not just sitting. Okay, stretch out. Reach towards the sky. Reach for the sky. I just feel like someone just pulled my woody cord. Reach for the sky. For some reason, my back keeps cracking when I open my arms, and I gotta shake my hips out. That's the main thing that has been getting tight when I sit and do these lives for so long, is my hips and my shoulders, because my posture isn't the greatest. I trying to have better posture, but I'm a little bit of a slumper. And that can add up over time. And I have some shoulder injuries from sports, from being a crazy baseball, hockey, and basketball player, diving all over the place for fly balls in the outfield, and dislocated both my shoulders a couple times, actually, doing stunts like that. I've had multiple knee surgeries also. Put my body on the line for my sporting events. Oh. So again, just take this opportunity, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the newsletter. If you want to leave me a donation, I always appreciate it. I appreciate any way that you do it, through the super chat or the super sticker, through buy me a coffee, through super thanks, through checks in the mail. I'm not picking on you, Carolyn, but I thought that was pretty funny. But it was a very nice note. I got a really nice note, and it's a lost art, the handwritten note. And there's just something magical about that type of thing. It reminded me, and this by no means is meant as an insult or anything, but it reminded me of getting a handwritten note from like one of my grandparents. And I've always enjoyed that as a child. There's something special about that is hard to reproduce sometimes in digital land, right? So thanks again. Okay. How are we all doing in the chat here? I'm just checking in with all of you. You guys are having such an awesome conversation here. Are there people still here today? Are we still around? Let's see. I'm just making sure. Good conversation about out of bounds placements and all this and all that. Let's see. Where did everybody go? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you another sneak preview of the Decans of Cancer, which isn't on sale yet, but since we're moving ahead here, just give you a little insight into these things. I will say this, I give a lot of this information away for free on my channel, which I don't mind doing. But if you are so inclined and you want to support the work that I'm doing, purchasing the webinars really does help me out. And I don't like putting things behind a paywall. That's why a lot of times I will share things even on my channel, but I do need to eat too. So I'm trying to figure that balance out. So now we're in Cancer season, right? And let's get to Cancer 1. There's so many interesting things we could go through. I'm not going to go through all of it today, but you could see that we've got the meeting, the union of body and spirit. I talked about in this webinar the gate of men, the gate of Cancer, or the gate of humanity, if you want to call it that. They had the gate of the gods and the gates of humanity, or the gates of men. One is where souls entered, Cancer, and the other is where souls left this plane of existence, which was the Capricorn gate. And here's where we're entering and unifying the spirit with a body. This is the ultimate resolution of that myth of where we've chosen a lot and we come to be embodied, and we're infusing our spiritual energy into something that we want to nurture into fruition. So we see the Two of Cups here, which is a Venus-ruled decan in a moon-ruled sign. So finding the feeling of love and maternal care, nurturing maternal care. Chokmah in Bria, which is emotional awareness. Chokmah is the sephira that's like a flash of insight or awareness. And in Bria, it's an emotional one. The union of body and spirit, romance, falling in love. This is where we're aware with the sun in this decan of what we need to feel supported. Appreciating beauty in others is something that can come around this period of time. Creating mutually beneficial and harmonious relationships. So questions you could ask yourself at these these things. I was just looking at the chat, and Carolyn is saying, I'm 73 years old, all about writing real letters. Oh, bless you, Carolyn. I'll tell you what, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here today. And I've lost some of the elders in my life recently, and it is really nice having such a diversity of ranges of experience here in this community. And it's nice to be able to have people who are in that stage of life and still connected with some different traditions like letter writing. I love that. And again, I just appreciated what you did this past week, so thanks again. Okay, so questions we can ask ourselves during Cancer season, during this solstice, the beginning of summer, the beginning of a new season, the beginning of a new life, right? This is the return of fertility to the Nile River Valley in ancient Egypt. That's why they began their zodiac around the Cancer season. So it's just the embodiment again of life returning. So what do you need to feel nurtured? How do you verbalize it? How do you share? How do you take care of others? How can you offer your support in a balanced way? This is important for Cancers. Oftentimes we give beyond what is comfortable for us. I'm guilty of this. These are marathon sessions, folks. I love doing this. I think I have a special endurance for it, but sometimes after I'm done, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just completely wrung out. So how can you set healthy boundaries? How can you receive what you need in addition to the energy that you're giving? What new passion is attracting your interest? This is interesting too, about seeing what is igniting that attraction energy, Venus decan, right? How can you harmonize your relationship? How can you give as well as receive within your individual relationships? Cancer 1 is more about one-on-one relationships, whereas Cancer 2, where my son is more about group energy, I think, creating harmony within multiplicity like we're doing today. And then ask yourself, is this pairing mutually beneficial? Is it an equal exchange? And how can you infuse essence into a body? So here's the payoff for the sacrifice that's made in Gemini 3 is now you've chosen your priority. You feel a new attraction to something that you want to nurture and protect. It's not just this idea anymore. It is becoming embodied. It's another transition like Aries into Taurus, where you embody spirit fire into some kind of seed, right? And now you're infusing an ideal into an emotion, into a feeling, into a relationship. So another embodiment type of energy, especially with the moon ruling Cancer. Embodiment is very important. Okay, let's see. Stephen, have a good week. Nice to see you, friend. Okay. Yeah, we have people coming and going in the chat. And sometimes I'm still going after they've gone and picked up their kids or made dinner or something. Kalia says, Spencer, can you tractor lead a honeycomb class? It's a sort of book, right? Tractor lead? Oh, teach. Can you teach or lead a honeycomb class? Um, sure. I mean, I can walk people through that. I wonder if they do that, but yeah, I might be able to do something like that. There's a lot of really cool features in honeycomb, and understanding what it all means probably can be a little overwhelming at times. So that's a great idea. Maybe we'll do something of that nature. Maybe I can partner with them or whatnot. We'll see. All sorts of great ideas coming through. Um, honestly, a honeycomb planner, the best way to understand that is just learning your chosen method of astrology. I use a lot of the Hellenistic plugins, and by being able to understand the astrology, you're able to kind of unpack the things in there. Although deciphering it can be challenging. There is extras for zodiacal releasing. There is solar returns. There's aspectual things. There's learning the glyphs. I mean, it's really just the whole of astrology packed up in there. They're really great. I love them, and they're really good with their customer service and stuff too. Well worth. I wish they could sponsor me here. Maybe that might be something to look into. Because I'd tell everybody about it. Yeah, Monique, don't debate. Just buy it. It's super worth it. And then get the Hellenistic add-ons, Monique. If you're doing that, I would recommend the Hellenistic add-ons, and I would recommend. There's some other options. If you have questions, just send me a DM or something. I'll help you. I'll walk you through it. I do use the zodiacal releasing plugin. I use Spirit for my zodiacal releasing. Because I find that to be a little bit more about my mindset rather than just like my body. So that would, yeah. And thanks, Jeannie, for reminding me. That was the other thing I was going to suggest is you can choose to release from Spirit, Fortune, or wherever. And I release from Spirit. Zodiacal releasing is definitely, there's some debate and confusion around it. I tend to focus mostly on either the loosening of the bond periods or level 1 and level 2. You can get into the nitty gritty of level 3 and 4, but I find that the bigger changes definitely happen on those first 2 levels. Carolyn says, definitely consider teaching tarot's relationship with astrology. I've never been able to understand the correlations before listening to you. Oh, thank you, Carolyn. Just a heads up, Carolyn, if you haven't checked it out, I do have a Stars and Cards webinar where I talk about. It's a 3 or 4 hour talk I did for Nightlight Astrology that's for sale at my website in the store, where I talk about that relationship, and I might be doing more of that as we move forward. Okay, so that's the first decan of Cancer. Let's kind of go through the nitty gritty here, and you can learn more about this in my Decans of Cancer webinar. I'm just giving you little sneak previews here, and I can't give away the whole kit and caboodle. But honestly, if you tune in every week, you're going to learn a lot of it. And I'm not the type of person that holds back too much. You've heard a lot of what I have shared, but there's definitely some interesting things that directions that we've gone on in these webinars themselves that are very focused. Oftentimes what I find about the live streams is because we're incorporating a community and the discussion with the community, it can be a little bit, I don't know if unfocused is the word, but it goes off in a lot of different directions. Whereas with the webinars, it's very focused. It's 3.5 hours of me being very focused on that one particular topic. And yes, there is questions and discussions, particularly at the end, but I have a script almost in front of me that is helping me tell the stories in a very poignant way instead of a more off the cuff way. And I think there's value in both of these methods, but if you're looking for a more focused type of learning experience, The Decans webinars will really help with that. Oh, sorry, I'm laughing because Kelly. Oh, I said, sorry, it's funny. I've been saying Kalia, the beach, which which I've been corrected. It says Cali at the beach. Sorry, so I apologize, Kelly. Um, that is funny to me, and this is the challenge of the internet age when you don't have any spaces or separations between those words. It's all in the delivery, isn't it? That's very funny to me. And sorry for Okay, we're getting a little punchy towards hour 3 here. Let me get some blood sugar reinforcements. So I got a little shake. I think I need a little bit of chocolate. How about you? Dark chocolate? 85% dark chocolate? Treat yourself. All right, so I'm gonna chew my food for a second. I like these Simple Truth organic 85% dark chocolate cacao bars. That's what I've been eating lately. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate you. I got a little freaked out by some information about dark chocolate and the heavy metals potentially involved in them, but I just love it too much. And I think that the amount in these organic chocolate bars is so, hopefully, I don't know for sure, but hopefully so minuscule that it's not a problem. But if anyone finds a dark chocolate bar that they really like that doesn't have any of that extra junk in it or is tested, send it to me, or send me a link or whatever. I'd be curious. Unfocused is definitely the right word. Is that a bad thing? I'm sorry. This is part of the reason we're here so long, but it's also part of the way we establish the intimacy with one another, right? It's just kind of a unique thing that we've been doing here, interacting with one another in real time, while also trying to coherently discuss the astrology of an entire month. Something special about it. But yeah, let's talk Cancer season. All right, so let's look at the ingress chart for the sun into Cancer. This is something that astrologers do, like mundane astrologers. They'll look at an ingress chart for a season for a specific location and say, what's it going to be like in this location during this season? And in my area of Ypsilanti, Michigan, you got the ascendant on Regulus and a 12th house sun. So maybe people just be chilling out. Which is, honestly, this looks kind of like my chart. So maybe I'll just feel in alignment with my community. Monique says, time flies during your YouTube lives. Oh, good. Well, at least hopefully people aren't bored. I think I already drove away all the people that aren't vibing with this, like either through them just not showing up, or if they stop in and they're like, man, this guy's still going, droning on. People come and go. That's kind of the deal. And if you're the type that wants to get a cup of coffee and a cup of tea and hang out for a couple hours, yeah, that's awesome. If you stop in for 10 minutes, that's cool too. It's totally people's choice how they consume this content, or if a lot of people listen after the fact as well. So it's fun. All right, so this is the summer solstice, June 21st, 2023, 0 degrees Cancer sun. And we talked about the meanings with Cancer. In this case, the host of the sun becomes the moon, which, it's a lot of times we want to look at the placement of the host, but since the moon moves so quickly, it's going to be changing. It changes a lot, right? It changes every 3 days or so. So this is why Cancer is part of the reason Cancer is accused of being moody, is that oftentimes our ruler of our sun, of our identity, is shifting. So, like, for example, today the moon is in, it was in Taurus, but it's in Gemini now. So we have a little bit of a chatty, multiple perspective sort of moon. Like, and so you're getting that type of energy from me today as a Cancer sun. So pay attention to the moon as far as what your mood is going to be like during Cancer season, because it could change. And Beth says, Kate, 100% Kate. Kate says, in a getaway, unfocused is definitely the right word. In a get your cup of tea or coffee and make the chore easier kind of way. Oh, nice. EK Beth says, 100% Kate feels like chatting with a friend over chores. A little boost of learning as well, except every once in a while, I circle a date on the calendar with a warning or an idea. Oh, good. Nice. Lisa says you're drawing your tribe. Yes, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about the internet. There's a niche for everyone. And if you're authentic, you'll draw the people that you resonate with. And the people that you don't, they're going to go on their way. There's so many other things for them to do, and it's not really something to be offended at. It's just something that you're like, okay, you got that thing over there. Like, I'm not going to be the people that like slam 10 energy drinks and jump off a cliff to get an adrenaline rush aren't probably listening to my show. Like, they're off doing other things and watching people like, blow themselves out on like doing weird jackass inspired events or something. I don't know. I'm just making something up as far as what I feel like is the antithesis of the energy here today. But that's cool. Like, if that's what you're into, more power to you. Like, there's things for you, so that's the kind of the essence of getting older as a Leo type person, is you just be yourself and people will find you. And the people that aren't in your alignment, they're going to go their own way, and that's okay. So let's talk Cancer season. So shiftable, changeable. The sun is going to shift its relationships to the other planets during this time period. So it's starting to make a it is, well, here's the good news first. You want the good news first? Here's the good news. The good news is that it's out of that overcoming square from Saturn. So we're relieving some of the tension of feeling like, the weight of Saturn's overcoming energy with the sun. And it moves into a trine relationship. So there's a positive exchange from Saturn and the sun that is going on. Mercury will also relieve the tension between Saturn and itself eventually during this decan. The challenging part is that the sun is now moving into a whole sign opposition with Pluto, and Mercury will also be moving into that whole sign opposition with Pluto, which, I gotta be honest with you, those times sucked. I'm a Cancer sun, and the Pluto oppositions with my natal sun and Mercury just weren't fun. So I'm a little bit cautious about how to feel about this, because I do think that there's potential, especially when both of those planets oppose Pluto, probably closer to the mid-July, okay, mid to end of July, that you're going to feel that energy getting more intense, but you might start to feel the tension as the sun just ingresses into Cancer alone. The other thing that is, I've got my eye on is these, and I'll get to it, but the square between Mars and Uranus is kind of the big one for this decan. So we'll get to that, but that one, you're going to just start feeling that right at the summer solstice. There's some funkiness coming at the end of June that I've been warning clients and family, and taking my own advice too, because the Mars Uranus square happens exactly on the degree of my ascendant. Like Mars is on my ascendant and Uranus is exactly opposing my natal Uranus, and they're all in angular houses. So I'm kind of like, oh man, I'm gonna have to really like practice all my self-care and slow down. And I would advise that for all of you too, is during this period of time, slow down during this time. Yeah, Kate says, I love bumping into familiar faces. Yeah, it's nice. Um, it is nice to just have a group of friends here, you know. Monique is saying the Pluto opposition was wild for me. I have stories. Yeah, Monique and I are cancer buds. And same decan, I think, Monique, right? And yeah, that was a rough few years with Pluto opposing all that stuff. It was not the greatest. If you want to know the some of the impetus for what I have affectionately dubbed the depression beard, you can look no further than the Saturn Pluto conjunction opposing my natal sun. Like, so there was some stuff going on there that was like, I give up. Like, I'm just gonna grow it all out. And I really, at that period of time, now, if you've heard me tell the story of wanting to go off the grid and just escape from society and live on the farm that ended up not working out, that was around that period of time where I was just like, screw it, I'm done. And life didn't let me be done, and that's fine, and I'm probably better off for it. But there's some challenging stuff that comes up with those Pluto oppositions to your natal placements. Kate says, as a Leo rising, not everyone will like you, and that's a good thing. Has changed my life. Yeah, I mean, life's too short to worry that everyone's going to like you and be a people pleaser. I wasted a lot of my youth doing that. And after I realized that there were just certain people that I couldn't make happy no matter what, Kate, especially as a third decan Leo rising. I don't know which decan yours is, Kate, but third decan, there's going to be people trying to take a dump on you all the time. And you have to be like, I do not give a shit what you think. You know, like, I'm going to go do my thing. And you, like I said, you could take it or you could leave it. And I love it if you take it, but I'm not basing my self-esteem on it, right? And that's such freedom. That's the real freedom, is the liberation that you get when you don't base your entire life around whether you get the applause or not. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a Leo rising. I love it when you all give me compliments in the chat here. But at the end of the day, I can just go off and be me for the rest of the week, and I don't have to be a public figure 24/7. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why we get all of our good, stuff in here, because I need some time to rest after this. Oh man, I'm just looking through here. Yeah, Michelle's Cap rising, so hopefully the retrograde back into Cap doesn't hit too hard. Well, I think you'll be okay, and it's temporary. It's only gonna, it's gonna retrograde back into Capricorn until probably the beginning of January 2024. So you got a good 6 months of it, but in the grand scheme of things, after you've lived 20 years of it, should be fine. Like, should be fine. So let's keep going. So we get to the 21st. We've got a harmonious sextile between Mercury and Mars, right? Mercury and Mars, which is similar to the, I believe we had another planet that just went through that exact same sextile. I'm trying to remember. I think it was the sun. Man, I can't remember all the aspects that we've gone through. We had, we had a Mercury between we had a sextile between Mercury and Venus at 10 degrees of Gemini and Leo. And now there is a sextile between Mercury and Mars. That's what it was, at 18 degrees of Gemini and Leo. So maybe even being able to take action on some of the realizations that came up at the previous sextile, acting on your ideas fueling the ability to go out and do something with it. So this could be an active period potentially. Yeah, Callie says, sometimes I feel like I need to buy a vowel. Yes, okay, I love it. All right. Yeah, Illis J, what's up? Post Pluto opposite support group for the win. Illis J, you all forgive me from just rapping with Illis J for a minute. So I have Illis J, I have my capsule wardrobe with all of my hoodies that I bought, right? But the hoodies, they're not supposed to put them in the washing machine. So now what I'm doing is I'm like, man, I got to get like, I have like 15 of them. Um, I need to wash them by hand. I need to get like a hand washer. I'm gonna feel like I'm in like the 1800s trying to wash these hoodies so that I don't shrink them and destroy them. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Maybe you have some advice for hand washing some delicate hoodies that are 100% cotton and probably not the most, well made. They're good. They're nice. I'm wearing this one today, but they're fragile, I think is the problem. Anyway, but I digress. So sextile between Mercury and Mars, um, communicating your desires for recognition, respect. That second decan of Leo is really about getting a parade, right? Getting celebrated for who you are and your authenticity. And there might be you might feel like you're feeling a little bit of disrespect, and you want to communicate how you want to be treated. That's another thing that you learn as a Leo moving forward is you need to communicate what you need to feel respected and treated well. Doesn't mean you're always going to get it, but if you don't ask for it, it's hard to get it, even harder to get it. Does that make sense? If you just hide away and say, I hope people will just treat me with respect eventually, instead of saying, no, this is how you treat me, and this is how we should go about this. And again, people can choose to get on board or not. But those are about the healthy boundaries that you set as a Leo type person. Yeah, this is it's easy to get fired up when you have a fire rising sign. Sometimes I get like really passionate about things. I'm pretty chill on this channel, but every once in a while, that look, I talk about this with Leo clients and friends. There's this look that you get every once in a while where you're looking around and you're like, you can't possibly be talking to me. Are you talking to me? If someone's disrespecting you, like sometimes you get like fired up, like, really? No, there must be someone back here that you're talking to, because I'm a king or a queen or a royalty, and you treat me as such, right? There's a little bit of that you have to be careful of when you have major placements or angles in those areas, because that attitude, sometimes it can serve you well, and other times it can get you in trouble. And I've gotten in trouble in various times. Okay, so we get to the 24th. Let's move forward to the 24th. And something interesting happens. I originally did this incorrectly. When I was doing my notes, I said that Venus was going out of bounds again. I was like, out of bounds again? I just got inbounds. But that's not true. And I went back and I looked at my notes, and it was actually Mercury. I think I was, doing my notes at night again, which I shouldn't do. And Mercury is going out of bounds on June 24th. So it's going to be out of bounds at 24 degrees of Gemini on the 24th of June until July 6th, when it moves back into bounds at 20 degrees of Cancer. So this is Mercury on steroids, right? Because it is in the decan of Gemini that is really overthinky, right? Which is really like so many thoughts going on where it's almost too much. And then you put Mercury out of bounds, and there's just no checks and balances. So you just have to watch your brain around this period of time. It also could lead to some interesting insights through thinking outside the box. That's another benefit maybe of Mercury out of bounds, is you don't have to follow, or by not following social expectations, you might be able to find a solution that works for people that might not otherwise. So that is Mercury out of bounds. And we have all sorts of people chiming in about hand washing clothes. If you're willing to risk it, find a family member or friend with a hand wash setting on their machine. Monique says, I have a delicate setting on my machine. Is delicate on the machine the same as hand wash? Because I do have a delicate setting on my washing machine, but I don't know if that's the same. You could try that and then hang them to dry so they don't shrink. That's a good idea. And it should definitely do that. I only hand wash like very obviously delicate garments, but that's just me. Okay. Okay. So I can throw them in the washing machine on delicate and then let them dry and they'll be fine. Okay, fine. I could stop stinking in these. You're lucky that this isn't the 4D experience. No, they're fine. I rotate them enough and I don't wear them every day, so they're fine. There's just one or two of them that get a little funky. Speaking of the 4D experience, have any of you ever been to the 4D theater at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago? This is a theater where you're like going in the ocean and there's literally things in the chair that like poke you and like little spritzers that spray you in the face. Like me and Tanya went to this place one time and went and had the 4D experience, and Tanya commented after, she's like, is the fourth dimension annoyance? Like irritation. I always thought that was funny. Yeah. Okay. But I digress. I'm telling you, Gemini moon today, we're going on a journey. So that's Mercury out of bounds. And thanks for the advice on washing my sweatshirts. Some of you have come for this type of thing. Others of you are like, come on, dude. We're getting towards hour 3. Let's go. So Mercury out of bounds. And in addition to being out of bounds, there is a square that Mercury is perfecting during this time. Okay, that perfects on June 25th with Neptune. So you can see that not only is Mercury out of bounds, Mercury is wilding at the end of the month. Okay, so here's Mercury out of bounds. Mercury, you'll be wilded. It's square Neptune. Our thinking could be really, really out there, right? Like our thinking is not going to be normal during this end of the month type of period. Our communication style might not be normal. We may be, it could be pretty harsh with it as well. I would be very careful with your communication, especially because there is another aspect that I'm looking at that I'm more nervous about. I'm not nervous about Mercury Neptune. I guess I wouldn't make a huge decision around this period of time, but I'm more concerned about Mars Uranus. And this is perfecting on the 26th, the same day of the first quarter moon. And this one, Mercury Neptune isn't, I wouldn't consider it a dangerous transit unless you're making decisions that are, I would be careful if you're like someone who experiments with substances or something. I wouldn't overdo it with that. That's when it can get dangerous. But with Mars, Uranus, you just really have to slow down because it's an accident prone aspect. It's something where things can come up unexpectedly. Anger can kind of come up, bubble up unexpectedly. You could create a situation where you experience an injury due to moving too fast or something like that. Like there was a plan where my daughter was going to be doing some driver's training during this, and I was really nervous about it because she has a rising sign that's very similar in degree to mine, and her plan ended up changing. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, like just be very careful during these few days, this weekend in particular, June 24th through June 26th or 27th, because this is a volatile aspect. And this is something where, first of all, let's break it down, decan wise. The Mercury Neptune part of it, you've got too many choices and you have illusions about what is the idealistic vision that you're trying to sacrifice for. So try not to be overly self-sacrificing during this period of time, which is easy to do in Cancer season, right? Over mothering, right? This Monique, like just chill, right? Like, but we care about our babies. I'm just the same way. I'm very overprotective at times. But the Mars is going to be moving through the third decan of Leo, and that decan is the 7 of Wands energy, where you see someone defending their position on a hill against people who are trying to usurp their position. So this is a Mars decan. So Mars is in its own face, and it can be very volatile. It can be very helpful for defending yourself against people that are against the haters, I guess. That's part of the energy of this decan is you're going to have people that challenge your position and your authenticity, and there are times where you do have to defend yourself against that. I would say with the Mars, energy with Uranus, and Uranus being very close to or in the third decan, I think this is more about a force of nature that could be dangerous or something like that. Like maybe this is like a tornado or like a flood or fire or something like that. I guess I would be very careful. Fire would make sense with Mars in Leo. Just have all of your emergency stuff ready to go around this period of time. And I don't want to be a fearmonger. Oftentimes what we see as a very challenging aspect, we think about the worst case scenarios. And in this case, so oftentimes it doesn't always manifest. The good news about this is Venus is there, and Venus is trying to help. I think Venus might be softening this a little bit, as well as Jupiter being co-present with Uranus may also be helping. So it's not like it's a Mars Uranus aspect without benefic help. It has a lot of benefic help. So that's one thing that tells me that it could be less severe than what I would normally think about. But I do think that there is a possibility for challenging energy during this weekend that you should be prepared for. And how do you prepare for this? Slow down, anticipate difficulties in advance. When I saw this aspect and I saw the events that either I was going to be going through or that my daughter in this case was going through, I actually just advised her and to not do it. She was already kind of on the fence about it a little bit, and we ended up changing the plan. And sometimes that's what you do. If you prepare in advance, that could be helpful. Now, does that mean that you can eliminate all risk and all challenges in advance? No. Uranus is a planet that brings us surprises. There could be things that you've tried to plan for to mitigate a challenge, and something just happens from out of left field that you could not anticipate. So it's not something to fear, but it's something to respect. And I think that one of the aspects that I really respect is a Mars-Uranus hard aspect. Whether it's an opposition or a square, that's one where I say, it's important to have all your ducks in a row on those days, and to not take risks that you would normally not take, right? So if you're a risk-taking person, may want to dial it back on this day. If you're a risk-averse person, keep going with that and be prepared. And it just depends on where it is in your chart too. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge deal if it's not angular. I'm paying particular attention to this one because Mars is exactly on my ascendant, which tells me I need to maintain my cool that day. That could mean that I could get really angry or upset during that period of time, and I need to watch myself so that my anger doesn't express itself in a destructive fashion. And so if you know that going in, you can set up ways to release the steam valve. If you know that going in, you practice extra self-care, you have methods to release anger that are healthy, you have your journaling, you have your exercising, whatever it is. And if you see in the moment that you're getting to a point where you can see the next 3 steps that could happen, oftentimes we have this awareness. We're in the moment and we're like, oh man, that's making me irritated. Removing yourself from a confrontation. Let's say I hadn't resolved the issue with my other neighbor that I was having a problem with. Let's say I walked past them and they started yelling at me again. I would know that this is Mars-Uranus day. This is probably not the day to escalate a conflict because something unexpected could happen. Maybe some unexpected violence potentially. I've been talking with friends about this, and this is This has become a dangerous country on some level. There are a lot of weapons in this country that people have no qualms about using, and you don't really know somebody if they're like a stranger to you. And this is why it's very dangerous to escalate with people that you don't know, because you have no idea if they're mentally well, if they're packing heat or something like that. Like weird stuff like that can happen if you escalate conflicts. So what I would suggest, don't escalate a conflict. Walk away. Number one. Swallow your pride if you have your pride ignited. Oftentimes what Mars does when it's in the third decan of Leo is it says, I'm going to die on this hill and I am not going to budge. And that's your pride talking. And I think that the other energy, the opposite energy of Aquarius 3 is saying, you know what? I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight this one. I'm going to move on. I don't need to win this battle. This is a battle I can't win. So to alleviate the challenge with Mars in the third decan of Leo, you may have to say, you know what? I'm not going to die on this hill. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm going to go over here. I'm going to remove myself from the conflict. I'm a big, big fan of taking a time out when you're in a conflict situation. Huge. Like, I think that it's important to think about something before you let a conflict get into a place that you might later regret. So I again, this is one of the main ones where I'm not like watch out for this is gonna be scary, but this one is one where I say, be careful on this weekend and really watch yourself. So Beth, if you're doing your chores right now, circle this one and say, you know what, I'm going to be chill on this day, and I'm going to give myself and other people extra space. So another example, road rage, right? If you're driving somewhere, like all you California people joining me today, you get on the highway and someone's popping off, don't escalate a road rage conflict with somebody, right? Like, this is something where just let them go. If they want to be an asshole on the road, fine. I used to do some stupid things on the road because I was mad, you know. I have since released all of that because it was really dangerous. And I was not a good driver for the first third of my life, and I lost my license at one point because I always was trying to do too many things before I would leave the house, and I'd end up being late everywhere that I went. I was not good at time management, and it ended up making me have to drive a lot faster than I normally would, and I would get very anxious because I was already late, and it caused me to do some stupid things, and I got a lot of speeding tickets and things like that, and I lost my license. This was in college. This is not like recently, but it totally changed the way that I drove. Like, I don't ever speed ever anymore. I just will not do it. You know, I'll call somebody and be like, look, I'm going to be late. I'm sorry. And I have to be okay with that, rather than feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to disappoint this person. Oh my God, I'm going to do this. Part of it is that I'm, self-employed. So I really don't have to drive to work really that much anymore. And that has been a huge relief, because it was very difficult for me to adhere to a normal schedule. I just wasn't really good at it. I'm a slow mover in the morning. It takes me a while to get going, and I have to go through all of my things, and the whole 9 to 5, thing that we have to do these days. I just felt so rushed with it, and it didn't work for me. Now, I'm very privileged and fortunate to have a job where I can support myself doing that, and I have empathy for those of you out there. What I will say, if you are in that position where you have to go do things like that, just give yourself enough time to get where you're going. Prepare in advance so that you are able to relax into your day rather than rush through it. And I know all you parents out there are like, well, but I've got kids and they're chaos agents. Yes, that's true. And sometimes you're going to be late, and that's okay. Shit happens, right? But like, this is the day not to push it. Okay. I'm looking through the chat. Oh, wow. So Monique sending their daughter to day camp. Oh. And then Callie's daughter gets married on that day. Oh, that's baked into the marriage. Oh my. Well, you know, so it goes. Not every day is perfect, right? I mean, there will be other challenges. There's always a challenge in a chart, right? It probably wasn't an astrologer who elected their marriage, but so it goes. That's what we have to deal with sometimes. Yeah, Nils Chase is glad the air is clear with the neighbor. I am too. And there's always situations where you're trying to find a positive solution. Sometimes you can come to an agreement, and other times you just have to move on from relationships. And this is something where we all are navigating whether you can repair something or whether you need to move on too, especially with this eclipse energy that we're coming out of from this last Scorpio eclipse. So those are questions that you can only answer as an individual. Yeah, Dawn's pulling out the planner. Dawn says, my Aries sun husband gets hostile. I always ask to drive when we go off. Yeah, maybe you drive this day, Dawn, or just depending on where your rising sign is, be careful of your own anger, because Mars will be in your first house. You might be the one that's getting angry, so just take extra time. Beth says, yes, I have the whole week highlighted. My soon-to-be ex-husband as planets being aspected. Oh, yeah. Just give yourself a lot of space. Have a lot of compassion and space. It's your transition, Beth, is a tough one. There's a lot of feelings. Anytime you're ending a relationship of any kind, there can be a lot of anger that's expressed that is masking sadness. And I think if you can feel compassion for the sadness while protecting yourself from the projection of anger, it'll be easier to get through it. Even when we're ending a relationship, like conscious, peaceful uncoupling is always preferred. And it's not always possible. But that's why you have to have healthy boundaries in place. And when you understand that this astrology is happening, maybe save a really difficult conversation for some other time. Or if you feel yourself getting into an argument, don't escalate it around this period of time. De-escalate. Remove yourself. You see what I'm saying? Because with Mercury out of bounds, square Neptune, we could be popping off about all sorts of stuff around this period of time, right? And that's not healthy. Just practice silence at this period of time, I think would be great too. Callie says, I asked if I could have an astrologer elect the day, and she said, no. Oh, no. Yeah, Callie, that happens. I mean, even though we warn people about things, it doesn't mean that they will always follow our advice. And sometimes that's just their fate. And it's hard feeling that Cassandra-like energy, Cassandra being, a person in myth who was able to predict the future and predict the fall of Troy. And they didn't listen to her. And it was very painful for her. And I've gone through this a lot. I actually told my mother not to elect this, to have the surgery that she wanted to have a double mastectomy when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, because I saw Mars on her south node in an angular house, which medical astrologers advise that can cause issues with the blood. You don't want to have Mars on the south node because there's real issues with it. And sure enough, a week after she had her double mastectomy, she had a blood clot that went through her system and went into the brain and caused a severe aneurysm that ultimately, after a few years of severe disability, led to her death. And it's very painful when you could see something like that in a chart and literally you have warned them about it and they're still, and you couldn't do anything about it. And that's a really, really tough place to be in. And it's just part of life, and part of being an astrologer is you can't save everyone, even the people that are most important to you sometimes. And as far as the marriage election, you may just have to let them go on to their challenges that Mars Uranus baked into that marriage chart is going to have. And keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on the how they express conflict and how conflict is expressed within their relationship, and try to help. You can help counsel them on healthy conflict resolution if this is baked into a relationship chart, I think. So Illis J is saying the lunar mansion is good for marriage that day. Just treat it with a little extra care. Yeah. So there you go. There's, like I said, every chart is going to be a mixed bag. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Monique says sometimes fate is fate and we can't control when people want to go. Yeah, that's a great point, Monique. And that's something I've really taken to heart. Like, my mom was in a difficult situation that was difficult for her, and maybe it was her time, and obviously it was. And it's never easy, especially if they're young. I mean, my mom was 62, like, and she was like 60 when that happened, so it's young and it's difficult, and it's just part of coming to terms with the fact that you're not always in control of things. Just because we're astrologers doesn't mean that we control fate. And as much as an astrological magician will try to tell you that they can nudge the wheel of fortune, and in some circumstances, the really good ones can. I do believe that magic, I do believe magic is real, and I do think that there are ways to adjust fortune, but not everything is adjustable. And they're just things that you have to come to terms with. And that's just part of what we have to learn as astrologers, accepting the things that we can change, or accepting the things that we can't change, and changing the things we can, right? Oftentimes what I find, though, with this is that astrology is a tool for changing your own perspective on the events that happen externally outside of you. And that in turn can change things. There's a concept, if we can get into a deeper discussion about this, I'll be brief with this, but there is a really great lecture, I don't know if you all can find it, by, what's her name? Dorian Greenbaum, I believe. Is that her name? Yeah. And she talks about fate and free will and pronoia. Pronoia being the ability to slightly shift your fate due to foreknowledge. And if, like the advice I've given you with Mars Uranus, it's not a guarantee that something bad is going to happen, but it is, if you know in advance that those conditions are there, you can make a different choice in the moment. And thank you, Beth, for the super sticker. I appreciate you. So think about this like weather. The metaphor for astrology and weather, I think, is a pretty good one. It's deeper than that. But if you know that the sky is getting dark and that you can hear thunder in the distance, you probably should take some shelter. If you get a tornado warning, you should go in your basement, right? If you go out in the middle of an open field holding a golf club in the middle of a tornado, you have not heeded that warning. And and sometimes a tornado may come out of nowhere, and you might be golfing and you might get struck by lightning, and you couldn't have avoided that because you didn't know any better. But if you know that tornado is coming and you still choose to go golfing instead of going in your basement, then it's not a guarantee that you're going to lose your life, but you've increased the odds that something bad is going to happen. Does that make sense? So if you know this stuff in advance, you may not be able to prevent, like if you're in the basement, you might not be able to prevent damage to your house, but you may be able to prevent losing your life. And those are small changes that really make a big difference with things like astrology. So think about that as you move forward through this very difficult transit. All right, Beth, take care, friend, and good luck with this. It's good to see you, and I'll send you an email soon too. I really appreciate you reaching out and took your words that you sent me this week to heart, and have a lot of thoughts about it, and we can hash it out more later. Kate Louise says, wow, thanks for sharing that story about your mom's story. Sorry to hear about that Mars on the South Node. I will take note on that. Yeah, I learned that from a medical astrologer. I believe her name is Judith Hill. And she has a whole book about the lunar nodes. I'm just looking at it. I think, yeah. And that book specifically talked about surgery challenges around Mars on the South Node. and avoiding that. Now, I rationalized it after she wouldn't change the appointment to like, well, maybe it's just cutting something out that wasn't supposed to be there, like a cancer, right? But it ended up manifesting as one of the more extreme bad significations that was spoken about in that book. So again, sometimes astrology, it hits the worst case scenario, other times it passes without issue. In my mom's case, it was angular. It was in her seventh house, on the north node or on the south node. On her, it was Mars conjoining the south node, her natal south node, very close to her descendant, and squaring a lot of her Cancer placements. She had Venus and Mars in Cancer, so that was another thing. Like she already had a kind of a challenging Mars in her chart. But anyway, yeah, Judith Hill was where that information is coming from. You can look more up on that. And thank you, Callie, for the super sticker. I appreciate you. Lisa says, it's as if energy is there in a transit, but we can use it in a constructive way, hopefully. For example, I liked how you used the chainsaw for your trees during a Mars transit. Yeah, Lisa, that's great. Great observation. Like I knew that there was a Mars energy that was going to manifest in some wave of possibility. And I helped nudge it in a direction that could be constructive. Now, maybe there's an energy here, an opportunity here to nudge this energy in a constructive direction, potentially. Maybe I'm having trouble thinking of a concrete example, but I think that there could be something where you direct this pride into standing your ground in something that isn't creating an explosive type of thing, right? And also you can think about the opposite energy to balance it out. Dawn asks, which book do you recall? She has so many. I'm just looking. I'll go get it. I knew it was on my shelf. This is The Lunar Nodes, Your Key to Excellent Chart Interpretation, written and illustrated by Judith Hill. If you could see that here. It's this big yellow book. It's not very thick, but there's a lot of really good information in it. And her advice ended up working out. I mean, for the bad, but so it goes. Like, how valuable is it though to know that? And if you do have someone who listens to your advice and avoids the worst case scenario, I mean, that's great. I've had situations like that where other people in my family I have told them about a really negative aspect and they avoided the worst outcome. And that does feel good when that happens. And clients come to me for that specific type of advice also. This is why when you come to a reading from me, I'm not the type of astrologer that is going to skirt around challenging aspects like this. Like I try to find positive things to manifest, but I also feel like it's my duty and responsibility to at least give people a heads up when stuff like this is in their chart, because I care about people. I want them to stay safe. And there are certain astrological aspects that look more dangerous on paper than others. Now, there's other things that you got to think about here too. Jeannie's asking, how do you direct a fundamentally self-sabotaging energy to be constructive, such as 12th house energies? I mean, yeah, that's a good question, Jeannie. And I guess the short answer with the 12th house is that there's multiple significations with the 12th house beyond just self-sabotage. One of the ones that I've tried to take to heart is that there is a solitary energy to the 12th house. And oftentimes when I'm feeling, really out of sorts, I know that I just need to take some alone time and I need to serve others as well. Yeah, like Monique's saying, transcend or suffer. This is why I share some of the more painful things I've gone through. Like, I've had a lot of difficult things in my life. I'm not even sure that it's more than other people, but sometimes it feels like it is. It's hard to get a perspective on it. But by utilizing that suffering for a purpose, to find meaning in it, and that meaning being, if you share it, maybe helping to alleviate the suffering of others, it really can help you to navigate those 12th house waters better. Yeah, service. Everybody's saying service. I agree. Here's my I guess is it a dharma that we're doing here today? What is the word for service in that tradition? But I feel like that's what sometimes what these live streams, what I at least I'm trying to intend them to be, is a service, and I hope that you're getting that out of it, and that the sharing is helpful, because it is vulnerable to share that stuff. And I don't know, and you all share your trials and tribulations here too, and that can be healing also. Like there's catharsis in that, and also it's not just the sharing of the tragedy. It is being able to share how you came out of it on the other side, right? And what you learned from it, and what you may do differently, or what you may advise in that situation. Like I had a really difficult like single parenting experience as well, like with a really toxic co-parent. And I've had a lot of friends that have, and clients that have come to me in similar situations, and I said, and I've had to tell them, this is how I maintained my integrity during this very difficult situation, and here's where I was out of alignment with it, and what I learned from that, right? So that's part of what I would suggest with that. Yeah, Monique says, because if we're not careful, we can stay stuck in victim mentality or pity party. Well, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not immune to that. I've really struggled with that at various times in my life, as has my partner. We sometimes talk about like, man, feels like we're just bracing for the next crisis, but that's no way to live. You have to, even if you know that you have a 12th house thing going on, there are ways to find gratitude in your life, and every single moment is not a crisis, or it shouldn't be. You may face crises, but if you stay present, you can respond to the crisis that is in front of you, and you can also respond to the things that require gratitude in that moment as well. It's about staying present. Okay, yeah, and Dawn says, we're not alone, even if we feel it. That's the one good thing the internet has helped with. I think that's part of the 12th house journey too, is like we've created community here from like a weird space, right? Like a weird online space, but it still is community. It's still a version of community. Lisa says, serve without sacrificing too much of yourself where it's not so sacrificial. That's good advice too, Lisa. Balanced giving and balanced sacrifice instead, which also takes your own needs into account rather than martyrdom, right? So that's good advice. And thank you, Jeannie, for the super sticker. I appreciate you and your little laughing fox there. It's nice. Carolyn says, what you do is a wonderful service. Well, thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate you. No, that's okay, Jeannie. I like it. That's a good sticker. First time ever sharing a sticker was going for the thank you one. Yeah, no, it's all good. There's still money in it. So it's the intention and the act has been received. So thank you, friend. I appreciate you. Yeah, it's a thought that counts. Don says, the best serve I found was helping those who definitely are in much more stressful situations than I at the moment, like a homeless shelter or an animal shelter. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to take the focus off of your own pain. It doesn't mean we ignore our own pain. That's another challenging thing about 12th house stuff. Sometimes we can, project the pain onto others. But yes, by alleviating the suffering of others, that is healing, not only for them, but for you as well. Okay. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you. So let's move on and kind of finish this one up. What do you say? We're heading towards hour 4 here. I appreciate all of you, though, and the super stickers and spending time together. This is a big month. There's a lot of astrology in June. And this particular weekend, again, was worth spending extra time on, because I just really think it's a very, very important time, and something that's piqued my curiosity and alarm bell, I guess. And you know me, I'm not someone who tries to, I don't want to be a reactionary, anxiety producing astrologer. I want to create peace. But again, sometimes life happens, and being prepared for some challenges is also just wisdom, right? Monique says, or blame my God. That's what I've done. 12th house moon. Yeah, blaming the universe and the divine and God. Carolyn says I was a retired psychotherapist. It's like group therapy. It is sort of like group therapy, and which is fine. And I hope that you'll get not only that, but some useful information out of it too. And yeah, and blaming God, Monique, like that is kind of the ultimate 12th house thing, like cursing the universe. I've done that a lot, and I think that one of the lessons with the 12th house, Monique, is learning that the universe is a friendly co-creator instead of one that is your enemy. And a lot of that comes through maturation and a perspective shift. And it's a really difficult one to do, especially if we're if we're victim mentality, but if we are experiencing trauma, or if we have generational trauma or childhood trauma or adulthood trauma or any trauma, economic trauma, anything, and learning how to continue to have faith in a benevolent universe. So hard to do, but that's the essence of faith, is really being able to hang on to that thread on some level. Okay. And yeah, like not everybody has to call it God, divine, universe. I don't always do that. But I do think that there is a force that unifies our experience. I don't know if it's personified the way that religion has portrayed it, but I find spirituality in nature, and I see a balance in it, and I always look back to that for the answers. So coming full circle, turn on those bees, that beehive sound, and you'll feel connected to something, right? You'll see that there's something greater than ourselves, than just our pain, right? Go take a walk. I think I saw something advice on Instagram that a walk isn't always going to solve everything, but there are a few things that are made worse by taking a walk, so I love that. All right, let's finish this off, friends. So that's the 26th with Mars squaring Uranus. Just my notes: dramatic urges towards freedom, sudden breakthroughs or breakdowns, rash action based on pride or defending territory, destructive forces of nature, eruptions of anger, or feeling disrespected. So things to watch out for. That same day, Mercury moves into Cancer. The 26th here. Okay, so we've got Cancer, Mercury. So there's Mercury moving into Cancer on the late on the day on the 26th. It's moving closer to the Kazemi moment, where we're figuring out what we need to feel nurtured and feel supported. Okay. Now we're going to be able to communicate our emotional needs a little bit better, hopefully, and have compassion in our thinking. So communicating our needs, or the nurturing that we have for others, emotional communication, maybe learning to absorb information through osmosis, like water or a sponge, rather than having to think about it rationally. I have Mercury in Cancer, and oftentimes as a musician, here's an example. I was very bad at reading music, but I was very good at watching a musician play and absorbing the essence of what they were doing and repeating it. So that's the sort of shift where I really struggled with music on a page, music as an abstract concept, but feeling the feeling and then learning from that was something that really helped me. So consider that as Mercury moves into Cancer. And it will also start opposing Pluto. So we have to be careful about our communication and try not to get into manipulative power struggles with our communication as well. So our Kazemi is going to happen on on July 1st. So plan for that in advance, of a download of knowledge of how you should, how you want to feel supported and nurtured, and how you can best nurture others. Mercury is also out of bounds, remember, until the 6th of July. When Mercury moves into Cancer and is out of bounds, we may be overly nurturing. We may be over mothering. See what I'm saying? We may be like communicating in a way that's just maybe too clingy or too oversaturating. And that is a danger. And we have to watch out for that with Mercury in the first decan of Cancer. As we move on to the 28th of June, that's when we see the trine between the Sun and Saturn. So that's nice, right? We've had this square throughout a lot of June, and then we finally are able to kind of come to an agreement between these two planets. And this is something where you may be able to start accepting the limitations that Saturn is presenting you. You may be finding that it's easier to team up with other people. Cancer, first decan of Cancer, harmonious relationships, to be able to support the dreams that want to become manifested and concretized into reality. And you may have to let go of some dreams that are just not feasible. So you might be able to find support. The other thing that's happening here that I think is interesting, there's actually a grand water trine on this day with the moon in Scorpio. So this is kind of cool, even though Scorpio moon isn't, always the most revered of placements. I do think that there's an ease of exchange between the water sign placements during this day. And maybe that's what we need after maybe the higher stress of the Mars-Uranus aspect. So I do think that if you play your cards right, things could work out okay in the end when it comes to this energy. And finally, there's two more things really. On the 30th, Mercury is going to make its trine to Saturn. So because they're working so closely together, we're going to have the Sun trine Saturn and then Mercury trine Saturn in short succession from one another. So this is where we may be able to communicate from a more rational or sober perspective, where we may be able to have clear thinking and communication around our emotional needs that will help bring us a higher sense of purpose and meaning into our lives. Simultaneously, Neptune is stationing retrograde, so this will also maybe help us review how we sacrifice for one another and whether we're sacrificing for the right cause. That third decan of Pisces is really about sacrificing for a cause. It's a Mars-ruled decan. And we may have illusions about what we've been sacrificing for that need to be reevaluated for the rest of the year. So that's something to consider as well. All right, friends, that is June. Let's do some I-Ching and animaling. I'm just going to look at the chat here before we go into that. See if I missed any questions. Mimoa is here. Hello. Sounds awful. I'm already feeling terrible. And now with the upcoming Venus and Mars in the 12th, gosh, I hope this year is going to be over soon. Oh, Mimoa. Virgo rising. Well, try not to get too worried, Virgo rising. I know that there's anxiety that's produced with some of that. And I really hope that I didn't produce anxiety for folks. Think about it like this. And this is tough for Virgo placements, and I have a lot of them. Imagine that you are in, let's take the car metaphor, and you see that there is an accident that is coming, right? You see that you're going to rear end somebody. And instead of tensing up, if you do tense up and you slam on the brakes, your knee is extending and you could rip your knee up. Let's say you don't and you swerve, or that you do something different where you don't tense up and you let yourself go limp and loose and flow. You may not put yourself in a position to sustain the same type of injury. So by being flexible, by going with the flow, by not tensing up and living into the answer, and again, there's so many manifestations of how something like that can turn out, that we've talked about some of the worst case things, but we've also hopefully given some methods of working through it to anticipate it so that we can manifest, maybe we can lessen that pain potentially. So I guess try not to overthink it or overplan, live into the answer, and we got your back if something something happens. B says, any advice for a Virgo rising with a Taurus MC to keep a roof over my head? I've been passing a lot and tired from not having resources to eat and take care of myself. Oh, B. Well, you probably got Uranus blowing things up on the MC. And I don't know. I'd have to look more at your chart to think about that question. As far as keeping a roof on your head, let's see. I think that sometimes there are ways to think about a sense of home that aren't material. I know that that's maybe not the answer that you want to hear, but I'm thinking about this in my own situation because I've been asking a similar question with a Scorpio lower midheaven. And I've been asking the question, why do I feel like I always have to manifest a crisis situation in my living situation? Why can't I just relax in my own home? And a lot of it comes from growing up in an environment that didn't feel safe. And I've been trying to examine my own behavior in my domestic situations that may be not supporting a sense of peace. So I think, B, it starts with feeling at home with yourself and feeling peaceful with yourself. Because wherever you go, there you are. And that is something I've really had to take to heart, is that there is no magic place that is safe and secure. That place is internal. And I know that that's a little bit of woo for a Virgo rising, but I really do think that that's true, and it's worth something to experiment with. I've been experiencing health challenges I simply can't afford to take care of, though it puts my health in jeopardy. I don't have the resources to take care of them. I'm sorry, B. Well, hang in there, and this too shall pass. And I'm rooting for you. And again, that ability to feel safe within your own experience and body is number one, and then things will follow and flow through that. And there's going to be some challenges along the way in that journey, but that's a great starting point. Just looking for chat here. I've been asking for support. Okay. So friends, and I am not going to be able to solve every challenge today as much as I would like to. And if you are suffering, I am so sorry. And I hope that just spending some time together has been maybe a relief, a temporary relief from some of that. I don't know if I'm just a guy doing some astrology and trying to hold some space for you. I don't think I'm a miracle worker of any sort, and I'm only one dude. But we are strong as a community. And B, if you're struggling, just hang in there. And I hope that you'll continue to come to the community here and that you found at least a little bit of peace within this communal sharing today, and that you know that there are people that care about you, and that that there is help out there, and you might just have to dig for it a little bit. You know, I health issues are always challenging for me, because a health challenge is always that's a tough one. But sometimes it's a test of our characters, and hang in there, friend. Okay. All right. Let's see. So let's finish this off with our animal and our I-Ching. Yeah, housing insecurity is something that boy, that's a toughie. I'm housing insecurity and health challenges. There are just some things that are above my pay grade, and those feel like one of them. Again, I'd have to look at your specific chart. So I hate to be like, well, sign up for a reading or something, but that might be a better way to do that. And I'm sorry again that I couldn't offer you more assistance. Um, so, friends, the hexagram for this month, okay, for this month. Number 16. Number 16 translates to enthusiasm, stirring up, broadcasting, preparing for, providing for, enjoyment, delight, beginning a new undertaking. There's two changing lines. It says, the very source of enthusiasm, great things can be achieved. Have no doubts. Friends gather round you, as a hair clasp gathers hair. So that's the first line. And that says, if properly prepared, this is a good time to act. Release your doubts about the future. Express ideas with confidence. Use optimism and sincerity. People will join enthusiastically. Bring people together through your confidence and conviction. Oftentimes, and maybe this is advice B too, oftentimes our own sense of doubt and self-doubt can lead us to either miss opportunities or ignore help that we have in our lives. I'm a big proponent of gratitude. I'm a big proponent of things start to move when you feel unification internally about things. When we don't feel like we know where we're going and where we're heading, that's when it's very difficult to manifest physically. So what I will say is that no matter how small that you need to start, try to start shifting towards gratitude. Like maybe there's 99 things going wrong in your life, but maybe there's one thing that's going right. Maybe there's one person that is still supporting you. Maybe there's something in your life that you can hang on to that says, this is something that I am so grateful for. And that multiplies. That will multiply. I really do believe that. And I don't think that that's just some new age woo. I think that when we express gratitude, even in the smallest situations, okay, as a Virgo, start small, right? Start with the little tiny things. It may help open a perspective up to start almost a tidal wave of good fortune in your life. And again, there are certain things that we can't avoid that are difficult things. And I feel that I've had some things that I just couldn't avoid no matter what was going on. Like, and you've heard all of them on this channel, right? At the end of the day, though, I know I have a lot to be grateful for. And I've learned a lot from the suffering that I've experienced. And it was not for no reason, right? It wasn't meaningless suffering. And it wasn't meaningless because I made it meaningful, if that makes sense. Suffering can be meaningless if you just let it pass and try not to engage with it at all, as far as like what you can learn from it and how you can change from it. It becomes meaningful when you examine it and you reflect and you say, what can I do with this suffering? Can I help someone else who is going through something similar? Can I change my behavior due to this suffering? Can I have a new appreciation for something that isn't the suffering? So all of those things are good first steps. So there's one more changing line. It says diluted enthusiasm. And I marked the squares to Neptune, the Mercury square and the Sun square to Neptune. But after it is over, one changes one's ways. If one changes one's ways, there is no blame. So this line encourages us to adapt to the changing conditions. Don't get deluded by your enthusiasm and think that everything in your life is wonderful if there's things that are challenging. It's important to stay realistic. Don't get carried away by success. This is part of the message, I think, of the Saturn and the overcoming square to all the Gemini placements this month, is we do have to have a Saturnian consciousness and defer to Saturn in this circumstance, because Saturn is in the driver's seat. And that sometimes means that we have to have patience. It means that we have to be realistic about what is or is not possible. Sometimes means that there needs to be endings in our life. If we have been having different habits that have, drawn us away from healthy situations, we really have to look really hard in the mirror about those things. And oftentimes there's bad things that happen that aren't due to our own, faults or whatnot, but there's still things that we can do in response to them. This is changing to hexagram number 23, which translates to splitting apart, deterioration, stripping away, collapse, falling apart. But on the flip side, stripping away old wood to promote new growth. Okay? It advises you in this hexagram to maintain a low profile. Secure your relationship with those that are important to you, that do support you, rather than trying to fly too high. Okay? That hexagram always scared me in the past, but I understand it now as a bonsai person. Oftentimes, I will need to cut away extra growth to promote balanced growth. So there are certain times where eliminating clutter and eliminating something in our life is really the best possible way to move forward in a healthy way. And that's where the faith part comes in. That's where we have to take the leap and jump, right? This is especially for you Virgo placements, Virgo rising, Virgo planets out there, Saturn in Pisces time is tough. And it requires you to understand that some power outside of yourself is a higher power, or hopefully has your best interest in mind. You have to suspend your disbelief for a period of time and believe that there is good possible in your situation. Without like just not doing anything. Do you see what I'm saying? Like this is why there's a balance between all of these. There's dualities and balancing points. There's a story about praying to Allah, but tethering your camel, right? Like pray to the universe for guidance, but then take the necessary action steps to protect yourself. Okay. The animal that I got for this month is the duck. And this one talks a lot about the duck as being a symbol of home, of family, of change. It has a strong nesting instinct. So this is also, talking about the things we've just been talking about. Finding healthy ways to manage stress was something that the duck really helps us with. Like, remember that phrase, water off a duck's back, right? We need to release agitation. This is something else that I-Ching really speaks towards, is if we're constantly living in a state of agitation and chaos, it's going to be really difficult to find that centered place. So oftentimes what Saturn in Pisces asks us to do is to be still. So this is the thing. If you're in a period of crisis, sometimes you need to have a fight or flight instinct. Other times, if the crisis is in immediate danger, calming down and being still, allowing the sediment that is always agitated and making the water cloudy to settle, and you can find that clarity. This is why I often advise people in conflict situations, if it's possible, to take a time out, to get some space, to clear your head and to calm down so that you can come back to it with clarity. And that's really part of the lesson that I think that Saturn in Pisces is asking us this month in particular, especially with the stationing. And also adaptability, being in a mutable sign like Pisces. Ducks also flock together. They teach us to live in the moment, to release our worry about the future, and to let go of grudges and resentments in particular was one of the things that came up in the literature about them. It's important for us to feel our emotions and let the catharsis go rather than hanging on to it indefinitely. This is part of the empowering part of learning from your suffering, is not holding on to the grief, the resentment, the projection onto the other, and saying, what can I do today? What small action can I do today? And how can I just let that emotion pour out of me, right? Rather than hold it in our bodies. Okay, friends, that's what I've got for you today. This has been such a pleasure. We are hitting the 4-hour mark. So happy to be with you today. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that you are all doing well out there and navigating the challenges of life with grace. I appreciate all of you. Do me a huge favor if you can and like the video, subscribe to the channel and the newsletter. Decans thing is on sale, Gemini and Taurus for the next little bit. And yeah, appreciate all of you. I hope that you have a great June. Hope you're having a great new moon cycle here, and It'll be okay. This too shall pass, right? So I'm going to take off, and I hope that you all have a good one, and we'll see you the next time. Okay? All right, friends. Remember to be kind to one another, and be kind to yourself as well, and that'll make it easier to get through all of it. All right?